everybody. Welcome to another episode of Purple Insider presented by FanDuel. On the show today, Manny Hill. Yeah, he's going to pick the schedule, but we got a lot of other stuff to talk about too. So let's go. All right, Manny Hill is frothing at the mouth to pick the schedule one more time before training camp and get his official prediction, and then I'm sure we'll pick it again after training camp, knowing what we know then. But Manny, I want to start out with storylines in training camp, not just running through them, but let's kind of rank them in terms of which ones will matter most to the regular season, because there's a lot of camp storylines that at the end of the day don't really dictate what happens to your NFL team during the season. But then there are ones where you go back to camp over and over. Yeah, remember back in camp, we were talking about this and then it manifested itself that way. So I think the quarterback position is the right place to start with maybe it isn't, Manny. You tell me. So the quarterback battle, will it matter? Not the quarterbacks and how they play in the season. That will matter, obviously. But will the quarterback battle matter in some way in the regular season?
I don't know if it will, because I think it's going to be Kyler Murray, and I think barring injury, Kyler Murray is going to, play fairly well and end up starting for the entire season. I think the only way it becomes a storyline in the regular season is if Kyler gets hurt. If he gets hurt, especially like early in the season, and he's going to be out for, up to a handful of weeks, and then you've got to go to JJ McCarthy and say, all right, JJ, can you keep this season afloat? Can you, kind of reestablish yourself now? And hey, if you play well enough, this is your job now. We could see how that goes. But I think barring injury, I think we're going to see Kyler Murray for 17 games, and he's going to play pretty well, because I think this is an offense that can work for him as long as he's able to really pick it up. And I think this is a team that's good enough to at least contend for the division and make things interesting.
There's a few ways that it could matter, and there's one way that it won't. Where it won't matter is the scenario that you laid out. If Kyler Murray just wins the job very quickly and then has a good season and stays healthy and everything is fine, then yeah, we're not ever going to talk about that quarterback competition in training camp ever again. But there are some situations where it might, which would be if Kyler Murray maybe starts the season slow and isn't really as connected with the offense as he's supposed to be, and they dragged this thing out all the way until late in training camp. Then we might go back to it like, oh, that slow start. Maybe he could have used a few more. We tend to second guess things occasionally in football, but we might get that if, let's say, they don't win against the Packers and he seems like he's a little bit off with the offense. And then after the game, he says, yeah, I didn't have a full preseason. Then you could be starting to cook with gas right at the beginning of the season. But it will matter quite a bit if JJ McCarthy wins the job or if JJ McCarthy is called upon. And then that development time will matter to him of getting those first team reps and improving throughout the offseason. And if Kyler struggles so much that JJ ends up overtaking him, then of course, yeah, we're going to go back to, wow, I can't believe that it ended up turning out totally different than we expected it to turn out. But I think if we're really trying to project forward, will it matter to the season? Those are the only situations where it does. And I think that O'Connell is going to decide on this thing early enough to where if it's Murray, that he will still have enough of a full ramp up to begin the regular season. Sometimes we over dramatize a little bit. Like Daniel Jones was in a battle with Anthony Richardson all of last year, came out, played great, right? Because Carson Wentz didn't even come to training camp, and he came out and played just fine in the very first game against the Cincinnati Bengals.
Yeah, I think, ultimately it's going to come down to, health and not just the health of someone like Kyler Murray, but, Christian Darrisaw is a guy that's been, when he's healthy, he's one of the best, left tackles on the planet. But he has been banged up now the last couple of years. He had the bad knee injury in 2024. And then last year was kind of trying to bounce back from that and was kind of in and out of the lineup a little bit. They need, things to be really stable up front. How does Blake Brandel handle being the full-time starting center now? Can he take on that role? Can Will Fries have a kind of a bounce back year? Can Brian O'Neill, who's getting a little bit older, can he stay healthy? Like, all of that is going to play into this too with the quarterback position, because yeah, Kyler Murray can run and he's like Pac-Man out there. He can kind of just run around and scramble and make some plays if he needs to. But ultimately, we know KOC wants Kyler Murray to be in the pocket and make throws and make reads down the field in the pocket. And he's only going to be able to do that if that offensive line in front of him is healthy enough and gives him enough protection. So there's a lot of different ways that this can kind of play out. But I think in a perfect world, Kyler picks up this offense, goes through training camp, gains all the experience and knowledge that he needs in this offense, and then come that first game of the season against Green Bay, he's ready to hit the ground running and lead this offense.
All right, so let's talk about what other storylines going into training camp will matter the most. I will let you kick this one off. Like, which storyline would you rank, aside from, like, put the quarterback thing is just in a different universe from every other storyline, but which one do you think will correlate the most to the regular season and to their success or failure?
I'm really intrigued by what is going to happen with Harrison Smith, because we just don't know yet. And it might be a situation where Harrison's just waiting to let things kind of play out in training camp. He's played in this league long enough. He's gone through the grind of training camp, and maybe, with a week or so left in camp, he's, hey guys, I'm back. I'm ready to go for another season. But we don't know for sure if that's going to be the case. And if it's not the case, Josh Metellus then, I think by default, would kind of step into a newer role. Now, he's obviously a very smart player. You've said it many times. He's one of the smartest players on the team, if not the smartest player on the team. So he figures to be a guy that can adapt to really any sort of scenario that he's been placed in. But it is, if Harrison Smith doesn't come back, that is going to be a new sort of experience for a guy like Josh Metellus, a new role for him. And then everybody else is going to have to kind of slot in, and kind of get in where they fit in, so to speak, in that defensive backfield. So that's going to be something to really, I think, pay attention to as we navigate through training camp. That question is just going to be, is Harrison Smith coming back? Has Harrison Smith made a decision? Is he going to come back? What's going to happen there? And I think right now we really don't know. It's hard to really tell if Harrison's going to come back and play, because he hasn't said he's going to, and he hasn't said he's not going to either. So that is definitely one that I'm going to be kind of watching, and we may not know until we get closer to the end of camp.
Yeah, to expand on that, the safety position in general is something that we're going to be watching extremely closely during training camp. And if Harrison Smith does not at any point show up, which I think if he's going to, that it would be after camp, after the fans are gone, after you no longer need to live in the hotel across the street and all that sort of stuff, because, he just doesn't want to. I would imagine he doesn't really want to do a lot of that stuff. I'm always careful to never speak for Harrison Smith, because I don't know what he's thinking, but he could show up tomorrow. But if he doesn't, then where does everyone fit into this mix? Where does Josh Metellus actually play? Are we going to see a lot more Jay Ward? Is Jacoby Thomas potentially a factor right away? Because if there's any position on the field where guys have transitioned really quickly from college to the NFL, it is the safety spot. So if Thomas, who clearly, drafted by Brian Flores, if he's somebody that he really likes right off the bat, then he might mix into a role and we might see Metellus all over the field. Or if they don't have a whole lot of confidence in anybody else, then it could be, Metellus and Theo Jackson or Metellus and Jay Ward. I think that Theo is probably pretty settled in the role that he's in right now. But if he doesn't have a great training camp, it's not like he played over the moon last year. In fact, at times they were going with Jay Ward over him, or they were going with different looks and taking him off the field. So their confidence can't be through the roof when it comes to where Theo Jackson fits in. And that unit is going to be incredibly important. We've seen it in Brian Flores' defense, going back to Belichick's defense. He always had really good safeties, the Rodney Harrisons, and players like that. So going way back, like, this style of defense often requires a guy who could come down to the box. The deception that plays into it is vital. And when Harrison wasn't there last year, it wasn't the same. So I agree with you that I think that is an absolutely huge storyline that will correlate big time to what's going to happen and how the defense actually plays out. You alluded to this one I will touch on next, and this one might be my number one storyline of what's going to be the connection between Justin Jefferson and whoever is playing quarterback in terms of storylines that will drive the success. Last year, there were some things that I wouldn't say we got wrong, like when we talked about what was going on, but we didn't project correctly into the season. And one of them that we didn't project correctly was that Jefferson missed a lot of training camp, and we figured it would be fine. And I mean, based on the player, Justin Jefferson, he's been so good with so many different quarterbacks. It was like, well, all right. I mean, once he gets back to practice with the hamstring injury, then him and JJ will just click and it'll be totally fine. He'll be wide open, and, KOC will get him running some in breakers and it'll be fine. It was not at all fine. And the first even game of the season, it looked like something was off between those two. Jefferson dropped a ball and the timing wasn't right. And I was like, okay, I guess they needed a lot more time in training camp. And with Kyler Murray, he's been good over his career at getting the ball to number one targets, but we don't know exactly how this is going to work out with Justin Jefferson and either Kyler Murray, or, he's been throwing in the offseason with JJ McCarthy. So, could it be where Jefferson and McCarthy click way better than Murray? And then all of a sudden that makes the quarterback, scenario interesting. But if Jefferson does not perform at the highest level, this offense is going absolutely nowhere. And I think that we all know that.
Yeah, it all really, we talk about the quarterback position, and obviously it's, in the grand scheme of things for football, it's the most important position on the field. But really, I think with the Vikings, it's quarterback and Justin Jefferson, like a 1A, 1B type of scenario in terms of overall importance to the offense. This offense is better when you're throwing the ball to number 18, because he can run every route. He can make every catch. He is the do-it-all wide receiver and the ultimate weapon for any offense. And so it is so vital for whoever the quarterback is to have things squared away with number 18, because if you have things squared away with him, it's going to have a domino effect on how everything else functions in the offense. It's going to positively impact Jordan Addison and how he performs. It's going to help Jawan Jennings, potentially, and how he's able to perform, even when you're not able to throw it to Justin Jefferson because he's being double teamed. And sometimes when he's being double teamed, you still want to throw the ball to him because he's still going to catch it. But if Justin Jefferson is having success, if he's got the chemistry with the quarterback down, it's going to have a domino effect on everybody else in the offense. It's going to allow everybody else to be able to rise above and take their game to another level. So, yeah, you've said it about Kyler Murray having a history of being able to get the ball to the number one wide receiver, and that's going to be every bit as important now too. And JJ McCarthy, look, it didn't go well last year, but McCarthy, if there's anything going in JJ's favor, is that he does already have a little bit of experience working with Justin Jefferson, having gone through it last year. Obviously it didn't go great last year, but there is that experience there. And now I think if you're him, you're just trying to build on that and try to improve that chemistry a little bit. But yeah, like you said, this offense is going nowhere if number 18 ain't getting the ball. And that's going to be, I think, priority number one.
And even though I don't think that the quarterback performance in training camp has always correlated to what happens in the season, as we saw sometimes when a quarterback is not connecting with certain wide receivers, that usually does. Even go back to 2018 where John DeFilippo's offense and Kirk Cousins was really struggling to pick it up, and there were different issues there. And we saw some frustration from wide receivers and from Cousins, and that showed up as the season went along. And that was an instance where we could go back to training camp and be like, yeah, they were having a really tough time getting on the same page then. So it's not shocking that they're having this problem now. And we saw it last year with not having Jefferson and where that showed up during the season as well with JJ McCarthy. So I think this is one where if you are struggling to get on the same page with Jefferson in training camp, it's a problem. But then, on the other side of the coin, Sam Darnold and Jefferson, as the offseason went along and the training camp went along in 2024, it started happening every single day where they were connected on downfield passes, and we're like, this is where you start to believe that the Darnold thing could happen, is when he connected with Jefferson. So it is enormous to them. Where would you like to go with the next one?
I want to go running backs, if that's all right with you.
Absolutely.
Because this is so interesting because, the Vikings run game has kind of struggled in the last couple of years. Really, if we're being honest, during KOC's entire tenure, the running game just hasn't been what it really should be in order for this offense to really hum. I mean, they've had good passing offenses, with Kirk in 2022 and Sam 2 years ago, but even then, the running game wasn't as great as it probably could have been or should have been. And when you look at the running back room, no pun intended, they're kind of running it back.
Yes. Good one. Yeah.
With a Aaron Jones who is a year older, and Jordan Mason, I think was fairly productive for them, but I think he got put in this position where there was a lot more pressure on him than I think he could really handle when Aaron Jones was banged up. And now you're kind of going back with kind of the same unit. Now, Claiborne, who they got kind of late in the draft, we'll see what happens with him, and he can, maybe develop behind the scenes. But you're essentially running this thing back, pun again, with the same group of guys. And now it's like, okay, well, how is the running game going to be better if you've got the same guys back there? Well, now it's going to start with up front, the blocking scheme, whatever the case may be. That's going to be, I think, huge, really, for this offense. I mean, we talked about the connection with Justin Jefferson. Obviously, that's priority number one. But also, what's going to help with that connection to Justin Jefferson is if you've got a pretty effective running game. So that's going to be something I think that's going to be interesting to see where they go with that, because they're essentially bringing back the same group of guys.
The hard thing is a little bit to figure out during training camp, what is this really going to look like? Because run plays usually look fine during training camp. They're not really drilling the running back as he's blasted through the holes. They run for a touchdown every single time. And the Vikings smartly don't tackle during this period, and they don't get their guys hurt. But that makes it a little challenging to see, all right, is somebody got actually a break and actually a hole, or was that just the defensive player stopped because they're not supposed to tackle the running back? And also, we know a lot about Jordan Mason and Aaron Jones, and Jones does not practice a whole lot during training camp, but I think there is an area where we could say this will matter, and that is Damon Claiborne, Xavier Scott, what's going on behind the starters. I mean, the likelihood is with these two guys, the violence with which Jordan Mason plays, and then the age and injury history of Aaron Jones, that someone else is going to be needed. I have continued to say don't entirely sleep on Xavier Scott, because he played last year and was someone who really emerged for them and can catch the ball and could pass protect. And it wouldn't shock me if he plays as a third down back. And Damon Claiborne, I mean, it would be, you wouldn't you'd be surprised how quick this guy was in person, right? It's hard to miss when you see him go out there and just even catch the ball and just even run with it and explode and so forth. So there's exciting elements of Damon Claiborne, but is he going to be able to transfer that into an actual role is a real question here. I mean, we've seen guys like this in the past. Michael Bennett had his moments of that real true crazy speedster. It wasn't a long run, but it was, he had one. And then we've seen other guys like Ty Chandler just not really be able to get onto the field very much at all. The one thing I did like to hear is that Aaron Jones is working out with Damon Claiborne in the offseason. There's no better human being in the world to spend time around than Aaron Jones. So I think that part of it, the play calling, the scheme, that's going to have to wait till the season, I think. Will KOC push the run button more often? Will they run successfully more often? And that also connects very much to, I think, one of the biggest storylines on the offensive side of the ball. which is Christian Darrisaw's health and how often he practices, how he looks. Is he taking every single rep out there and he looks like the Christian Darrisaw that we know so well? Or does it look like he is pretty banged up and is slowing down throughout training camp and having to miss more time? Because if he's not taking most of the reps, and then veteran players get, certain amounts of time off, but if he's not taking most of the reps, then that's really concerning. That's sort of a Captain Obvious statement, but I'll give you one more before you pick the schedule, Manny. And I think that is the new look defensive line and how these young guys perform. I believe, Manny, will tell us a lot because there's a lot of guys who are either going to be asked for the first time ever in their careers to play or for the first time ever to take on much bigger roles.
Yeah, I think obviously Caleb Banks being the first round pick and all the talent and, question marks about health and all that stuff is going to be a big storyline. But, I look at a guy like a Levi Drake Rodriguez, who's been around now for a couple of years. And, he was he's undrafted or was he the seventh round pick? Okay. Yep. So, he's a guy that, we've been kind of talking about every year in camp. It's like, oh, Levi Drake Rodriguez, how's he doing? What's going on with him? And then, last year he gets in a little bit more and starts having a little bit more of a role. He's a guy that I'm looking at like, all right, is there another sort of step to take? Simply because Caleb Banks has a lot of talent, but we just don't know how healthy he's going to be. And we don't know how, even if he is healthy, we don't know how productive he's going to be out of the gate, even as a first round pick. And, Dominic Orange, Big Citrus, what's going to go on with what's going to happen with him. LDR is the guy that's like, okay, hey man, you've been here for a couple of years now and we've been gassing you up a little bit here. Is there another level that you can take it to where you're not just kind of like a backup guy that gets in a few snaps a game, like you're an actual prominent force on that defensive line and you're making plays and you're becoming a regular contributor. So Tyrone Ingram-Dawkins is another guy that's kind of been around a little bit too. And you kind of wonder like, okay, is there another gear for him as well to become more of a significant rotational player on the defensive line? And Jalen Redmond, I think, is a star. He was awesome last year, and I think he's going to kind of continue that. But yeah, those guys I think are the ones where you're like, okay, let's see what you got. Let's see what you can do here. Can you kick your game up another notch?
And in general, I don't mind the idea of them sort of rolling the ball out and seeing who takes it. And LDR is one of those guys. Ingram-Dawkins, I'm very intrigued with. Does he play inside? Does he play 5 tech, 4-eye type of thing? Or does he play more of an outside linebacker role? He is such a unique specimen of a human being because he has freakish physical talent. But then last year we saw him also looked like he could play a little football as well. We've seen that many times. We used to make fun of it with Rick Spielman trying to chase the next Danielle Hunter. And yet, when you're talking about Ingram-Dawkins, he was sort of that fitting in that mold, like a later round pick with not the biggest production in college, but kind of played a bunch of different positions. And what I've noticed from talking to Ingram-Dawkins, I think he's a sharp guy and I think he learned really quickly. So could he be the one that takes that next step? Because that's often the guys that have the most success are the guys who can really intellectually handle it. And then he has the freakish abilities to go along with it, but they need somebody to step up because if you don't have anybody, if it's Caleb Banks is slow to learn, Dominique Orange doesn't quite get it right away, LDR is, not maybe ready for the bigger role. I mean, then you're looking around going, this is Jalen Redmond's unit and that's it. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think that they picked guys in Caleb Banks who's physically ready to play in the NFL. And even if he's not totally there from a technical standpoint, can just throw people. And Orange has played a lot of college football. So they have some guys that I think could translate fairly quickly. I know Banks is more of a project, but Orange has played a lot of football. So I think he'll be able to, and his job is one thing, stand in front of that center and knock him back. And there you go. But it's a major question mark. And that's a position, Manny, that in training camp practices, we can really see quite well. I mean, if you're getting pressures, if you're making stops, if you're dominating offensive linemen, we could tell. But if you're struggling, we can also see that right up close. So that will be something that I think if they are good just good, not even great on that D-line unit. They can have a top 5 to 7 defense. If they struggle there and teams can run against them and they're not getting interior pressure, then I think it's going to be a long season. So 2 of the defensive units that just have major question marks is not something that we've really had recently. I think with Flores' defense, in the last couple of years, we've kind of looked around and went, yeah, there's a ton of veteran talent, but now they're turning a little more toward unproven guys. So very interesting. One thing that will not be much of a question is Will Reichard, how he looks in training camp. He is amazing to watch, though. If you go to any training camp practices, make sure that you have a chance to see, Will Reichard kicking it around. Going to take a very quick break, and then Manny picking the schedule one more time before training camp. But I got to tell you guys about my friends at Brooklyn Betting, who I feel like, is it over the top to say they saved my life? Yes, but it is not over the top to say they saved my sleep. For years, the wife and I just struggled to get to sleep. We tried lots of different mattresses, and it was a huge problem. It was too soft, too hard, just couldn't get it right. And then finally, when we switched to the Aurora Lux mattress by Brooklyn Betting, it has been awesome sleep since then. My spine feels supported really well, and I can actually relax rather than taking hours of flopping around trying to get to sleep. And I wake up with a lot more energy to cover this here football team. And what I like about Brooklyn Betting is that it's not one size fits all. We had a lot of different options, and they can even find hard to find sizes for you if that's what you're looking for. So we got exactly what we wanted. With Brooklyn Betting, you get a 120-night comfort trial. So a really long time to decide whether you like the bed. And if you're not comfortable, you can swap it or return the mattress hassle-free. Go to brooklynbetting.com and use my promo code PURPLE for a 30% discount site-wide during their summer sale. That's brooklynbetting.com, promo code PURPLE for 30% off site-wide, exclusive with my code. Again, brooklynbetting.com with the promo code PURPLE. All right, back to the show. Okay, Manny, this is your thing. This is your time. This is your moment.
Love it.
One more to put it on paper, picking the schedule before training camp, and we will absolutely do it again after training camp is over to see if anything has changed in your mind. But look, every year it does. I mean, every year things happen that shift how we think of this football team. So let us begin week 1, Minnesota Vikings facing off with the Green Bay Packers at US Bank Stadium.
Week 1s are always probably like one of the hardest weeks to predict in the NFL because a lot of things happen. One year, remember when the bad Bucs team beat a really good Saints team in week 1 in the Superdome, and it didn't matter because I think the Saints went to the NFC Championship game that year. But anyway, I like the Vikings at home here to get a win to start out. It'll be close, but I like the Vikings to take this first one against the Packers.
I think at home is really useful, and the Packers not having Micah Parsons is an enormous break for the Minnesota Vikings. So 1-0. On to Chicago, where they will head to Soldier Field, which still is the home of the Bears. And until I hear otherwise, well, I will still think is going to continue to be the home of the Bears with all of their nonsense about going to Indiana or whatever. But Soldier Field, a beautiful place unless you're actually on the field dealing with their turf. Manny, do they win?
I will say yes,
okay.
They will win because it's early in the season in Chicago. If this game were played in December, I'd like the Bears' chances a little bit more, but I'll give the Vikings a win here and a 2-0 start.
Quick question. So you and I have been doing this now, picking the schedule for a long time, and we used to always say, look, just pick an L at Soldier Field. KOC has kind of broken the curse. He has just been the coach for the longest time. It was through lots of coaches. It was Zimmer was cursed there, and Childress and Tyson, like going way back. And we even did a study on it a few years ago. Paul Hodowanik, who was the intern, and looked into like how they performed at Soldier Field, even versus like the Vegas line. And it was unbelievably bad. And then all of a sudden, since KOC has come along, they've won there. Like, is it every year? Has he lost at Soldier Field? Am I forgetting any games there? 2022 was a game that didn't matter. 23. No, they won in 23 in the Tyson Bagent game, and then 24 was Sam Darnold having a huge game.
It was
an
an overtime game. Yeah.
Yeah. Then last year was JJ's comeback. So O'Connell has not lost at Soldier Field.
That's impressive. Well, one of my favorite bad, ugly, awful games at Soldier Field was the 2006 game out there in Chili's first year as head coach. Just look up the box score. The Bears won the games. The year the Bears went to the Super Bowl with Grossman. Just look up the box score in that game, folks. Yeah.
Didn't Grossman throw for like 34 yards?
30. He was 6 of 19 for like 34 yards. I think he had a passer rating of like 3 or like 0.3 or something.
Yeah.
And the Bears won the game by like 10. So,
yeah, that's a classic. So that has not been the case. And now continuing that streak in your picking the schedule is 2-0. And they head to Tampa Bay where it's going to be toasty in September. But how do they fare, Mr. Hill?
The Bucs are a weird team to figure out. You don't know if they're going to be really good or if Baker's going to be injured and they're going to be bad. And Todd Bowles, you just never know what you're going to get with them. Sounds a lot like a 9-8 or 8-9 football team, which is what they've been. Tampa's been a tough place to play for the Vikings for many, many years, many decades. And I think it's going to be tough this time around too. I'm going to give the Buccaneers the win here, dropping the Vikings to 2-1.
I just recently watched a Trent Dilfer beating Warren Moon game there that should not have been a win for Tampa Bay, but the Vikings really dropped the bag in that one. I think. Yeah, I think that's how it worked out.
I think that was probably. That might have been Tony's first win as Bucs coach in '96. At least that's the one I'm thinking of.
I think that's right. I think that's the game that I was watching. I have been binging completely random football games all summer long, as you would expect. So they're taking a loss here.
Yes.
Okay, 2-1. I also picked this one for a loss when I did mine, just thinking like going south on the road again after playing at Soldier Field is always kind of challenging.
Going to be hot.
Yeah. And Miami now comes to Minnesota. The Dolphins, they'll field the team for this game. So how do you feel about this one?
Everybody, can we all just pray for Malik Willis?
Yeah, I know, right? Seriously.
Good luck, Malik. You got paid. Good for you, man. But good luck out there. The Vikings are going to win this game pretty easily, I think.
Okay, a 3-1 start to the season and one of my early favorite games on the schedule at the New Orleans Saints. I think the Saints are very intriguing, Manny. Tyler Shuck in his second year. Kellen Moore did a good job with them last year. They've improved some things on that roster, especially in the backfield and given more weapons to Shuck. But are the Vikings up for the challenge against the improved Saints?
Could be a rocking crowd, especially if the Saints get off to a good start. I think that fan base, we know when the Saints have had good teams, that's a tough place to play, man. And so I'm going to give the Saints a win here. I think the Saints are going to be a pretty solid team, and that's the dome is going to be tough down there. So I'll give the Saints a win here, dropping the Vikings to 3-2.
2 NFC South losses would be kind of a punch in the gut, right, to the Vikings if that were to happen. So then they get the bye week and they go into it sad because they have lost 2 straight and they come out of it facing Daniel Jones in a revenge game. Not really, of course. If anything, KOC helped Daniel Jones get back on track with his career, but that's what Jones has said. Anyway, week 7, Colts, the middlingest of the middlingest teams. However mediocre, middling you think the Vikings have been, the Colts have been more middling. So that's who they will play in week 7. The last time these two teams faced, it was the largest comeback in NFL history. What will happen this time, Manny?
Cam Bynum revenge.
Yes, Cam Bynum. Yeah, even though the Vikings helped him get that huge contract. So there's no revenge.
Right.
There has to be a reason. People just say revenge game. There's got to be a reason.
I like this game for the Vikings because it's at home and they're coming off a bye, so I think they'll be rested a little bit. And the Colts are kind of a team that can be good, but you just not really sure, how consistent they can be. So I'm going to give the Vikings a win here and a good bounce back after the tough loss in New Orleans, coming off the bye and going to 4-2.
4-2, I think if Kyler's the starting quarterback, you're feeling like this is on track. This is kind of where you need the start of the season to go based on the middle of the schedule, which begins with the Detroit Lions. This would be at Ford Field, which has turned into one of the most difficult places to play, which I think sort of proves that it's more about the team most of the time when it comes to opposing venues than it is the sound or whatever. I think there is something to it with US Bank Stadium and the Superdome, but Ford Field did not used to be like it was the last couple of years when I went there. So now suddenly a challenging place for the Vikings to go play. Do they get to 5-2?
I'm going to say no. I think the Lions are going to bounce back from last year finishing in last place. The Detroit Lions finished in last place, and we know for a long time that was a regular occurrence, but in the Dan Campbell era, that hasn't been as much the case. So that's a team that's going to be hungry, looking to have a bounce back year, ready to go. I think they're going to be not very happy that JJ McCarthy went into that building last year and beat them, and played fairly well in that game. I think the Lions are going to be ready to play, and I think they're going to get the win here, dropping the Vikings to 4-3.
Well, they call it last place in the NFC North, but they call that first place in the NFC South last year. Same record. Doesn't make sense exactly. But okay, so that drops the Vikings to 4-3. And if there's such a huge difference between those two outcomes, because if you're 5-2, then all of a sudden we're going, okay, something's happening here, because we are approaching the trade deadline. And if you are 5-2 going into that trade deadline, then you're starting to have conversations about, well, what do you need to add? Is this team very serious? A lot of things would be going right. But at 4-3, you're not really selling, but you're not really buying. You're kind of stuck in the middle there, going into your most challenging game of the 2026 NFL season, Monday Night Football versus the Buffalo Bills of Buffalo. What do you think happens?
I have a feeling the Vikings are going to win this game. I don't know how. Maybe it's just because every year it seems like the Bills have like one game where you're like, how did that happen? How'd they lose that game? And I think this could potentially be that game. I mean, the Bills, I would imagine, will be favored to win the game. They're going to have the best overall player on the field, I think, in Josh Allen. But I think the Vikings being at home, and they've done all right in the Joe Buck, Troy Aikman era of Monday Night Football at home. They've had some pretty good games at home during that time. So I'll give the Vikings a win here, a needed win coming off the loss to Detroit and going to 5-3.
5-3 coming off a win against Buffalo would be absolutely huge, considering that they kind of had a little bit of a tough run there in the middle of the schedule. I just think that this is going to be game of the year type thing, like crazy performances, wild ending, whatever it might be. The last time these two teams got together, it was one of the most memorable games that I have ever covered, and I think one of the most memorable for Vikings fans ever. Like, it's usually a regular season game against a team that is not even in your conference. You're like, oh, well, okay, a fun game, but you're not going to remember it 5 years later. Oh, that one was, and there's the potential for that to happen again with Buffalo. So 5-3, and their first matchup with the Green Bay Packers, Week 10 at Green Bay.
This is going to be tough. Micah Parsons probably back by now.
Yeah, I would say
this
so,
point.
Yeah.
I think that's going to make a huge difference, and it's going to be at Lambeau this time as opposed to Week 1. So I'll give the Packers a win here, dropping the Vikings to 5-4.
The famous letdown game, the big win. I mean, this run of games, Detroit, Buffalo on Monday Night Football, the shortened week might matter a little bit too. And then on the road at one of the toughest venues. The thing that does help a little bit is that it's in, early November. So you're not talking about going down there when it's 10 degrees out and when the field is very slick, which, as we know, caused a little bit of a trouble back in 2022 for the Vikings. Now it's on to Mexico. The Vikings will play the 49ers in Mexico City at 5-4 and probably needing something here to get on a run because the schedule lightens up a little bit. So do they get a big victory in another country? I almost said overseas, but you could say overland.
Feels like there's going to be a lot of Niners fans at this game too, because they seem to travel pretty well, and it's regionally kind of a little bit more in their favor. But I don't know if the Niners are going to really be all that good this coming season. That losing some weapons on offense. Things are going to Brock Purdy's going to be tested a little bit. Christian McCaffrey's a year older. Kind of getting closer to the end. I wonder, they were so banged up at the end of the year last year. I just wonder if it's eventually at some point that team's been so good at being able to keep this together and stay a contender for a lot longer than teams typically are able to in the NFL. But I think at some point it's going to catch up with them a little bit. I think this is a year where the Niners could kind of slip and be, beatable. So I'm going to give the Vikings a win here, and I think that puts them at 6-4.
6-4, and then back home for back-to-back NFC South contests. I don't have a whole lot of belief in the Atlanta Falcons at the moment, and then they play the Carolina Panthers. So Atlanta, after this run, Detroit, Buffalo, at Green Bay, and in Mexico City against San Francisco is really, really tough. Then back to US Bank Stadium, the friendly confines for a big game, actually, if they're sitting at 6-4.
Which lefty quarterback is playing for Atlanta at this point? Is it Michael Penix or is it Tua? That will be fascinating to, I guess, find out.
You mean Tony Graziani? Remember Tony Graziani? He's like a totally random left-handed quarterback. I don't even know. I'm going to look this up real quick. Sorry about this, everyone. I need to know how many games ZIANA Falcons. I don't even know, what year would have this been? I don't know why Tony Graziani sticks in my head. What year did he play? Because he was left-handed. That's why. He went to Nevada. He played for them for 3 years from 1997 to 2000, and then played for the Barcelona Dragons, and then the Browns for a year, the Los Angeles Avengers, and the Philadelphia Soul for 3 years, and was an Arena Bowl champion. Good for him. Tony Graziani, his career, 48% completion percentage with 2 touchdowns and 8 interceptions and 999 yards. Just in case everyone at home was wondering if Tony Graziani was a real person, he was, and he was left-handed for the Falcons and may have performed the same way their quarterbacks will this year. I don't know. They have so many weapons, Manny, that the potential is there, but I just can't buy into the quarterback play. So is this a victory for the Vikings?
Yes, it is. And I don't know if it's going to matter if it's Penix or Tua, because neither one of them can stay healthy, it seems. And I like Kevin Stefanski, but good luck, man. That's going to be tough. But I'm going to give the Vikings a win here, and I think that puts them at 7-4.
7-4, right. Now, Carolina bringing in a more challenging team than in the past, but the last time that Brian Flores faced Bryce Young was Harrison Smith sack at the end of a game, strip sack. Yeah, I think DJ Wanham picked it up and ran it for a touchdown in that game. It was a hideous football contest, but Bryce was in hell playing against Brian Flores. He's had a lot more experience now, but I don't know how much easier it's going to be at US Bank Stadium late into the season here.
The defending NFC South champion Carolina Panthers at 8-9 last year. How about that?
Man.
The Panthers are feisty, man. They're interesting. I don't think they're going to be a train wreck. I think they could, be kind of that pesky little gnat of a team that gives people some problems. And I could see a game like this being kind of close and the Panthers being that pesky little team that's giving the Vikings some problems. But I think Vikings being at home will come away with a win here, and that'll put them at 8-4 and be pretty decent shape.
That would be great shape going into another difficult part of the schedule here as they go to New England for Week 14 at 8-4. Things have gone pretty good. This game all of a sudden is going to get a lot of attention. Thursday Night Football. So that would be, you win 2 at home, you get to go play a big Thursday Night Football game against New England, but do they come home with a win?
I'm going to say no. It's going to be a short week. The defending AFC champions, a team that's going to be motivated. It's been an interesting offseason, to say the least, for that franchise. I wonder why. But they're, look, they were in the Super Bowl last year. It's a good team. I know people questioned, the difficulty of the schedule and everything, but they got to the Super Bowl. They grinded their way there. I think Drake May is going to be a year better. It'll be in Foxborough. I'm going to give the Patriots the win here, dropping the Vikings to 8-5.
All right, 8-5. And just to take a quick look at the odds over on FanDuel, the Vikings are plus 158 to make the playoffs. So not favored to make the postseason. The teams in the playoffs, according to FanDuel, would be the Rams, Lions, Seahawks, 49ers, Eagles, Packers, and actually the Cowboys. But they always kind of get overrated by the markets because they have so many fans, I guess. So in this instance, the Vikings would be staring right in the face a very successful season, but how they do down the stretch will make all the difference. So they have Detroit coming to US Bank Stadium at an 8-5 football team against, I assume, a very competitive Detroit team. Do they get the win and put themselves in position to go into the postseason, Mr. Hill?
I'm going to say yes, because they're coming off a Thursday game, so they'll have a little bit of extra time in between this game, and it'll be a tough game in New England, and they'll have a little bit extra time to bounce back, and they'll have the game at home. So I think the Vikings will come away with a win. It'll be tough and close, but they'll get the win here and go to 9-5.
If we're at 9-5, we're talking about Kyler Murray into the future. Can they win the playoff game? Where are they going to extend Murray? That's going to be a conversation at the end of the season if it goes this way, without a doubt. They will play Washington in the following week, who clearly was atrocious last year, but I don't know is going to be as bad this year with Jaden Daniels coming back. But Daniels was given nightmares by Brian Flores. I actually think that's the game that got Cliff Kingsbury fired, because they had no plan whatsoever. So now it's totally different. It's a more KOC style offense with David Blau as their offensive coordinator, Durante Jones on defense. So they're kind of trying to be a little more Vikings-ish. But will Washington upset the Vikings at US Bank Stadium?
I will say no. But I do think that Jake Daniels, if he's healthy, is going to give the Vikings some fits and make this game very interesting and close. But I think the Vikings, again, being at home here, I think is really going to help them in this one. And they're going to pull off a win, and that'll put them at 10-5. Wow. That's really good.
Yeah.
Really
man.
good, 10-5.
Did you anticipate this?
I did not anticipate this. No.
This is what I always tell you. I always tell you, don't prepare. Don't think about it. Don't look at the schedule. Just right off the dome, how you feel about what's going on in that moment. And you might be a little bit just like very excited for football to happen here. But if the Vikings are 10-5 with 2 games left to go on the schedule, then KOC is looking at coach of the year potential conversation. Kyler Murray's looking at a new contract. Justin Jefferson, who is plus 1,800 to win offensive player of the year on FanDuel, is probably in that conversation. So they go to New York and play the Jets. Is this a letdown game, or is this the one where it's they take care of business?
I think I'm gonna count the Saints game as the letdown game.
Okay, all right, that's fair since the Saints were bad last year.
Yeah, and I mean, if the Vikings lose at the Jets on January 3rd, I mean, oof.
The real question is who's at quarterback for the Jets on January 3rd. That's what I want to know. Yeah, is it Boomer Esiason
at this point? Yeah.
Is it Neil O'Donnell, sorry.
Ray Lucas.
Ray Lucas is a great one. Brad Smith playing hybrid.
Tom Tupa. Right?
Another hybrid.
Let him punt and play quarterback, What the hell?
Quincy Carter, Jets legend. Anyway, so is that a win then?
Yeah, so I think so.
You've got them then 11-5 going into the last game against the Chicago Bears. Let's call it for the division. Let's say that the Bears are good. Let's call it for the division. Will they win the division in the final day of the season to get to 12 wins, man?
See, I was going to pick this as a loss because I was going to anticipate that Detroit has the division wrapped up, and the Vikings at this point have a playoff spot locked up, and so they're resting all their guys, and the Bears maybe fighting for a playoff spot need the game a little bit more, and they get the win. But if we're talking about this game being for the NFC North, I actually like the Vikings to win it.
Oh, wow.
And take care of it at home and go to 12-5 and win the division. I think it's going to depend on the situation. If it's for the division, I'll give the Vikings the win. If they've got the playoff spot locked up, and let's say Detroit has the division locked up, or maybe Green Bay. The Vikings will be resting guys and probably end up losing the game.
So I threw a scenario at you there, which is probably breaking some sort of rule of having you pick the schedule. But so what are you going with official? Are you going 11 official?
Yeah, I'll say this is a locked up playoff spot.
Okay.
KOC's resting guys and they lose the game. So
Gotcha.
they'll be
Max
11.
Brosmer plays in this one. Okay, perfect.
Yep.
An 11-win season, however they get there, Manny, would be tremendous for KOC. It would be tremendous for Kyler Murray if he's the one that's the starting quarterback. Of course, I think we know that it will not be an easy ride just through the schedule and very normal. And who would be even shocked if somehow they got to 11 playing 4 quarterbacks again or something, right? And you have no idea how things are going to really play out. But that's why we pick the schedule all the time. For the fun of it, to then go back and cross-reference what we thought then and then what changed and everything else. So, Manny, this was really fun as always, and we will check in for sure at some point during training camp. Maybe we'll get some preseason action in first and get your reaction to that. And are we willing to pick the schedule after one preseason game? Yes, we are. So we'll definitely talk again soon, Manny. Thanks for doing this.
You got it, my friend. Always a pleasure.
Football. All right, Manny Hill there, as always, a great conversation. So here's what I want from you guys in the chat. Fire it up. Let's get going with number 1, the storylines from training camp that you guys think will matter the most when it comes to the regular season. There's going to be all sorts of storylines. In fact, I've probably come up with at least 5 or 6 for every single position group. But which ones are going to impact the 2026 season the most? And whatever else is on your mind, throw it into the questions, the comments into the chat, and I'll take whatever you got for about, the next hour or so. But I do want to get to the cornerback position because I have not broken down the position yet. And I have to start with an apology to Jacob Thomas because the Vikings have a guy named Jacoby Thomas and Jacob Thomas. And when I was doing the safety position the other night, I'm going through and I get done with it. And I'm like, okay, did the depth chart and J Thomas, Jacoby Thomas. Okay, whatever. And, it got me. I totally forgot to include Jacob Thomas. So if you listen to that episode, I apologize to him. But he has a chance to make the practice squad as a deep depth type guy and maybe even win a spot as a special teamer if he shows out. So let me talk a little bit about the cornerback group. And I got my notes here. I'm going to run through them of the depth chart and the biggest storylines. While you guys jump into the chat and let me know which storylines matter the most to the season and anything else that you're thinking about Vikings football or, sometimes after 9:00 we get into life. I don't know if we'll go that deep into things tonight. So the depth chart is Byron Murphy Jr., Isaiah Rodgers, and James Pierre are going to be the starters. And at least as of going into training camp, I have Charles Demings as the next man up. Now he's a 5th round draft pick. And he's coming from Stephen F. Austin, so he will have to prove himself to get to that point. But when you look at the players behind him, there's not a whole heck of a lot of experience. Maybe I should just assume that Fabian Moreau is going to be part of this team, kind of the way we are with like Cam Akers every year. Like, oh, he'll be back sometime. Well, maybe that will be the case with Fabian Moreau. We'll see. But as of now, he's not on the team. So the 5th round draft pick, I think, gets that next man up spot behind the 2 starters and a 3rd player who could be on the field quite a bit. After that, we've got Dwight McGlothern, Zamiah Vaughn. Those are guys who have been on the team as undrafted free agents for at least a year. McGlothern is 2, and Zamiah Vaughn made a good impression last year. And then your undrafted free agents are Marcus Allen, a corner who went to North Carolina, Devon Armstead, who played at 3 different colleges in his college career, but was last at North Texas, and then Tyreek Chappell, who played over 2,500 snaps at Texas A&M. So the biggest storylines for me about just in training camp. Now, in the regular season, there's quite a few with Isaiah Rodgers. Does he follow up his great season? And Byron Murphy Jr., does he bounce back from what was a difficult year last year? But we're not going to be able to find those things out until they actually start playing the game. So in training camp, the biggest storyline for the cornerback group to me is where does James Pierre fit in? Because over the last 2 years, we've heard Brian Flores and Kevin O'Connell talk about how, yeah, we want to see Byron Murphy Jr. in the nickel more often. That's where we think he could be really great and a big difference maker. And then it just doesn't happen a whole heck of a lot. He played 300 snaps there in 2024, and he only played 200 snaps there last year. But with James Pierre, who has only ever been an outside corner, that could give them some flexibility in order to move Byron Murphy inside and play Pierre if they really like how things are going. But also, in order for that to happen, there would have to be some dominoes that would have to fall, right? They would have to not be thrilled with the three safeties that they have and not want to play big nickel all the time and just have maybe Theo Jackson and Josh Metellus as the safeties and then play more nickel with Byron Murphy inside. If they really love what they see from Jay Ward or Jacoby Thomas, or I guess even Jacob Thomas, then they will use the big nickel a lot because that's very effective against teams that are using bigger personnel, because you can have Josh Metellus in the box and match up and tackle well and that sort of thing. If the other team is using a fullback or an extra tight end, that gives you an edge because he can still cover and he's got safety skill set, but he's kind of a linebacker in some ways. So that's the big nickel concept. I think that's what they'd like to do, but does that mean Jay Ward and Theo Jackson have both impressed them to the point where they want both of those guys on the field all the time? I don't know if that's going to happen or not. So that's something that we'll be watching of, are we seeing a lot of regular nickel or are we seeing a lot more of the big nickel and those three safeties on the field at the same time rather than the three corners? So where does he fit in? Also, if Harrison Smith comes back, then you can pretty much guarantee that it's going to be a big nickel type of situation with Metellus playing in the same role and they just won't make too many changes. Also, I'm curious about what James Pierre looks like on the field. You know, we've looked at his numbers and seen a little bit of him with the Pittsburgh Steelers, but he only played 377 snaps last year, and that was his second highest of his career. So he's been just a rotational player. Does it look like they think that there's more there? And they've actually been very good at this, of finding guys who didn't have the biggest roles. Isaiah Rodgers, Jonathan Bullard, players like that. Is James Pierre that next type of guy? I think that's the biggest question, biggest storyline of the cornerback group. Also, Charles Demings, I mentioned him. Does he have a case for next man up? I mean, he's coming from Stephen F. Austin. It's not the biggest school. It's an FCS school, but he did play a ton of football there, and his athleticism is through the roof. He was one of the most athletic corners. Think about the cornerback position at the NFL Combine, and this guy was one of the most athletic corners at the entire Combine. He can jump through the roof. He is quick, light on his feet, really hardworking guy, high IQ guy. They loved his character. He's a 5th round draft pick coming from an FCS school, though, at the end of the day. So can he keep those other guys at bay? The Dwight McGlothern and the Zamiah Vaughn, can he actually clear them on the depth chart? That's going to be something we're watching, and what he looks like in the preseason. And, you know, I should even add to it, like, is there something there for Charles Demings for the future? Because we'll at least get our first impression of him during training camp. And then in terms of Dwight McGlothern, he was kind of a darling 2 years ago, played really, really well in the preseason in 2024. We talked about him a ton, got a bunch of interceptions in camp. Last year, it seemed like they were souring a little bit, and we wondered, is he even going to be here? And they decided to keep him. But is this it? Is he kind of at a crossroads with his team? It's either now or never for Dwight McGlothern. It kind of seems that way. If you're an undrafted free agent and you haven't carved out a role for yourself, he has not played almost any special teams. He hasn't been active very often. If you haven't carved out a role by year 3 and you were a UDFA that's still stuck around, that's probably going to be it for you. So it might be a make or break type of training camp for McGlothern. And then Zamiah Vaughn was someone we talked about almost, it felt like every day. Hey, you know, the guy's taking second team reps. He's taking reps over Mekhi Blackman. Like, what's going on? Do they love this guy? Then they cut him and put him on the practice squad and we never saw him. So I was like, do they love this guy or not? I mean, he made some plays on the football and had some good practices, but they must have felt like he wasn't really ready. And also they knew that he could get through to the practice squad. It wasn't like he had 5 picks in the preseason or something and someone was going to scoop him up. But this would be a year where he has a chance to make the 53-man roster. And then any of the undrafted free agents. I mean, they've all got equal chance. Does anybody step up and have a chance to make the team? I think overall, this is one of the least interesting position groups, which is why I saved it till this part because I think that they're pretty well settled with those first three guys. And then it's all depth battles after that, which, we'll be watching and paying close attention to, but does it have a big impact on the season? I would say that it probably does not. So, all right, let's jump into the fan chat now. And a couple things for you guys. I mean, reacting to Manny also, where, Manny had them at 11-5 going into the last week of the season, which I thought, wow, I mean, Manny really drinking some purple Kool-Aid before preseason. But, I think that a lot of Vikings fans do believe that this team is going to be good. I see skepticism about Kyler Murray. I think that that's fair based on his history, and I see skepticism about the defense, which I think is also fair based on the fact that they lost a lot of talent, veteran talent in the offseason and have a lot of question marks there. But I also think that there's a belief that they have the offensive weapons to make this work and the defensive coaching to make this work as well. So I wonder what you guys think of Manny's prediction of having them going 11-5 into that last week, which, hey, might be for the division. Maybe you need one more win to win the division if you're in that situation. I think that that's a best case scenario. I've picked them to win 11. I think that that's very possible for them, but I also think that it is going to have a lot of things go right in order to get to that 11 win mark. Injuries, there's a lack of depth on the team. There's a lot of question marks that still exist, and we don't know what the quarterback position is going to be really. But based on Kyler's past, based on what you can put around him, based on the coaching that you have, the 9 home games and only 7 road games, the divisions that you're facing, you have 2 terrible teams in the East, you have 4 mediocre teams in the South. I think it adds up for them to have a chance to have a pretty good season, but are you buying what Manny was selling or not? Hunter said 11-5 going into the last game is definitely possible. I feel 10-6 or 11-5 is the type of expectation we should have for this team. Yep. I would agree with you there that double-digit wins is the bar, and if it's less than that, it would be pretty darn disappointing to have. I mean, last season was so miserable and so frustrating, and that was 9-8. If you do that again, and it won't feel like any progress was made at all, despite the changes that were made. Contrapaston, given Jefferson's comments on ESPN, what do you think Kyler needs to do to show the leadership-wise to win Jefferson over in the rest of the locker room? And I appreciate you, Contrapaston, for direct messaging me earlier today with the transcript. I had watched the little video that they put out, but reading that back about what he said about both quarterbacks. One thing is, I think that Jefferson, the safest place to be when he's asked about the quarterback competition is to just say, really happy with what I've seen from JJ, and it's up to Kyler to lead us. Because if you go into any other area with those guys, that's where it can be scooped up and start to make a bunch of headlines and people make a lot out of it. I mean, even then, if you just Google Justin Jefferson, I guarantee you there's 50 million websites who are like, you won't believe what Justin Jefferson said about the quarterback competition, right? So he doesn't want to have anything that people can latch onto. And I'm sure that they've worked on that, like Jefferson, of how am I going to handle this? What am I going to say? Because I don't want to alienate either one of my quarterbacks. I want to be a good leader. I want to be a good teammate. So the focus would be, all right, well, Kyler, come in and lead us. And JJ, very happy with how he's doing. And as long as you say that, then there's really nothing that anybody can take out of it. But if we were trying, I think that leadership from Kyler Murray comes not in the form of the locker room. I don't think Kyler Murray has to say 3 words to anybody in the locker room the entire season if he knows the offense and he plays really well. Sam Darnold was similar to Kyler Murray in his disposition when he arrived here. He was not the most outgoing, gregarious person. He was not celebrating every single throw. You guys remember the press conferences from Sam Darnold? Very soft-spoken. I mean, I think that behind the scenes, he might be a little more outgoing than Kyler Murray, but when it comes to his personality out on the practice field, I thought it was kind of similar. You just didn't see a lot of demonstrative stuff from Darnold. He wasn't yelling at receivers for having a bad route, or he wasn't, jumping up and down and doing cartwheels every time they completed a pass. And what I think it was TJ Hawkinson, because I asked Hawkinson about this in 2024. I said to TJ, like, how would you define Darnold as a leader because he doesn't seem like he's the loudest guy in the world, right? And he said that quarterbacks in the NFL at this level, now it's not high school, it's not let's go Friday Night Lights, give a speech in the huddle before you throw the final pass against State or whatever. Like it's not a movie. This is the pros. So what he said was the biggest thing that he liked about Sam Darnold was that every single day he showed up prepared and was the same guy every single day and worked hard to get the offense right every day. The consistency was where the leadership was. And so I think the same thing goes for Kyler Murray, where if he learns the offense and he comes back to training camp and he is locked in, he's got the calls right, he's got everybody lined up correctly. And when he drops back to throw, he identifies where he's supposed to go with the football and he completes passes and the offense moves. They are not going to say, yeah, but Kyler, why didn't you give me a speech about how I need to win one for the Gipper? Like, they're not going to care. What pros view as leadership is get me lined up correctly, get me into the right call, let's everybody know what we're doing, and then let's execute it. And then we're going to feel like you're really in charge. And O'Connell has talked about this before of like, I think that he talked about this somewhere. I don't know if it was like on a show or if it was in a press conference about how, the best quarterbacks, in terms of like them leading a team and showing toughness. I think he was asked about toughness in a quarterback. And he said toughness is like 60 plays, you are on point. Because you know how hard that is? Do you know how hard it is to be on point with your checks and your motions and your formations and all that stuff for 60 straight plays in the Superdome where it's insanely loud and your brain is rattling and everything else. And by the end of the fourth quarter, you are still laser focused and you still have everyone getting the right call lined up and you're executing the play. If he does that leadership wise, that's fine. He doesn't have to talk to anybody. And if he does not, then that's where the struggle is going to be, I think, is if he does not have the offense and they don't feel like he's given 110% to it and they feel like he's just sort of relying on his athleticism and playmaking. And this is where I talk about the 2024 season a lot from Kyler, because when I watched it, I felt like he was playing much more of prepared quarterback than he was in 2021, where his athleticism and playmaking, and he was great. I mean, in 2021, but his athleticism and playmaking was so central to that season being great for him, where it was just the crazy Kyler show every single week. Whereas in his more recent tape, it's much more get people lined up, make some changes at the line of scrimmage, identify the pressure, back to throw, hit somebody. And, he did scramble 40 times, where I think it was like 20, what did he have? 70 runs overall and 40 of them. Yeah. So that would be, I won't do the math, but it was 40. I think it was 40 scrambles in 2024 over 17 games. So that's only a couple of times per game that he was scrambling. And I think he's shown that he can be prepared, but he's got to show that he can learn an entire new offense and be locked in order to be the leader of the team. So that was kind of how I was thinking about what Justin Jefferson said. I also thought it was just the safest thing, because if Jefferson says, you guys will not believe how well this guy throws a football, then everyone's going to be like, wait, he loves how Kyler throws the football. Does that mean he's won the job? Like the online atmosphere is going to be a circus over the next, whatever it is, 4 weeks, 5 weeks. So I guess always just, remind yourself to take a deep breath during the quarterback competition. Mike, did Byron Murphy Jr. actually play worse last year than 2024? Seems like the difference was mostly turnover variance and not playing the AFC South. Curious what PFF says. So yeah, actually, I have some notes on that. And the biggest thing on Byron Murphy last year, the difference, well, there's three, call it three differences. In 2024, he was the second most targeted cornerback in the entire NFL in 2024. And he led all cornerbacks in interceptions. You get targeted more, you have more chances to get interceptions. And also, teams had high completion percentage, but did not get a lot of yards against him. So he graded pretty well. And we can pick that apart for a couple of different reasons. One, the Vikings were leading the entire season. Two, they were playing the NFC South. And also, Brian Flores is blitzing, so they're throwing a lot underneath, which you're not going to get negative grades for by PFF if the opposing team completes a 6-yard pass against you and you make the tackle, right? Last year, he was targeted about half as much because teams were not throwing as much against him. Did not have the interception luck that he had the previous year. And you think about his 2024 interceptions. Joe Flacco threw one right to him. Matthew Stafford threw one right to him. He made a great one-handed pick against Kirk Cousins, but that was a pop fly to the outfield that he was able to track down. Interceptions, a lot of variance. It goes up and down every year. Some years you're lucky and you get 6 or 7, and some years you're not lucky at all and you get 2. That doesn't mean you've changed enormously as a cornerback. But the real reason why his grade was much worse this year than it was, or 2025 than 2024, other than the picks, would be the penalties. He actually got penalized a lot in 2025. I believe it was the 8th most or 9th most penalized corner in the NFL. And you can remember that there were some suspect ones. There was one against, that was in 2024 that there was the suspect one against the Rams that was costly to them. But getting penalized is always going to really tank your PFF grade. In fact, they never ask me about the grades, but I wish that I could toggle that off. Like when looking at the all grades, offensive lineman too, like if I turn holding off, turn the penalties off, what do the grades look like? I wish I could do that because that impacts, not that it shouldn't. I mean, if you get a holding penalty, you cost your team 10 yards. It's really bad. And if you commit a pass interference, it's like giving up a catch. So I understand why they do it. I guess I would just be interested myself in what his numbers would have been, because they're very similar. If you don't focus on the penalties and you don't focus on the interceptions, the actual just like completion percentage, that sort of thing looks kind of similar. So I would not expect that Murphy changes or has changed a ton. I just think it's probably more of circumstantial. It's a great question. Prime says, when are you going to get Tom Pelissero on now that he's free? I felt really bad for Tom. Tom is one of those guys that I look up to a lot because he worked for the radio station that I got hired at, 1500 ESPN. That was how he started his career. So he started covering the Vikings for 1500ESPN.com. And I think they used to call him .com Tom or whatever, right? And he was ahead of the game for a lot of reporters doing it the way we do it now. So he was multifaceted, where he would write analytical breakdowns and film breakdowns and stuff like that, and then go on the radio and talk about them, which at the time when he was doing this, there weren't a lot of reporters in the country that were doing it. So I was, even not living in Minnesota, I was paying attention because social media had just started to how different people were doing their jobs. And Tom was one of the guys that I was like, and he was friends with one of my friends in Buffalo. So I was like, yeah, this guy like really does a lot of cool stuff that if I get a chance to be a beat reporter somewhere, then I want to kind of take that and be inspired by that. And that's what I did. So when I got the job, I tried to carry on that tradition of intermingling analysis with reporting and stuff like that. And then as he got more and more known around NFL circles, that's when he became an insider. That's when he got to know agents and coaches and all that sort of stuff by earning their respect, getting on NFL Network, and then broke a ton of news after that. But I think Tom still, when I listen to him talk and when he hosts Rich Eisen or he's on with Rich Eisen, I'll watch those segments. I still think he's a really, really good analyst. And maybe the next job for Tom Pelissero will be a little more spreading his wings that way, right? I think there are some restrictions to working for the network that is owned by the league that may be unshackled a little bit. So whoever it is that hires Tom Pelissero, as you guys know, is going to get an outstanding NFL reporter. And I'm looking forward to whatever he does next because I know that someone's going to hire him very quickly. But I was sad about that. I mean, Charles Davis also was one of my favorite guys. I think Charles Davis is one of those people that does it the right way, watches all the film, is very prepared. I don't see a lot of Vikings broadcasts because I'm usually at the game, but some games I don't travel to. And when Charles Davis has been doing it, I thought this guy is the most accurate depiction of this team for someone who just helicopters in to do the game. So yeah, some of those firings, man, with ESPN or choosing not to pick up certain people's certain people's contracts. Just brutal. And it makes me feel very, very lucky to have all of you guys that support Purple Insider and allows me to do it this way, because I don't have to wake up every single day with a knot in my stomach waiting to see if I'm getting fired. I went through that before. It was not a lot of fun. So with Purple Insider, I know that I have my thing here. I know that I have you guys, and it's really great. So I can't say I appreciate you guys enough. And I feel for all of the people that have gone through this, including Tom. But, Tom is in such a great position. He's put together such a great resume that I guarantee he's going to be back very, very soon. Contrapaston, how heavy you think Big Citrus's workload will be? Defensive tackle known to have a pretty steep learning curve. Curious how much he will be rotated in and out. So I was looking this up, and what I found last year is very few defensive tackles that were rookies played over 500 snaps. I believe it was 3, and that was it out of the entire rookie class last season. But there were a bunch of guys that played between 400 and 500. I think that's where we should set the bar for Dominique Orange. Come in on first down and 10 for sure. Judge it based on second down. Is it second and 13 where they're going to pass, or is it second and 5 where it's a run or pass type situation, or is it second and short? And then make a determination of whether you're going to keep him in and kind of rotate him, try to keep him fresh, because we saw in 2023 and 2024 with someone like Harrison Phillips, where he was kind of doing the nose tackle thing. And I think that Dominique Orange, for the way Flores wants to play, I think he's going to be very good because he has a quick first step. And this matters. I don't know that he's going to be the best guy that just rams into the center and then just kind of holds him on and sticks him in place. I think he's going to be moving left and right a lot from that nose tackle position. And he has a very quick first step for a guy that's that big, and he's really strong. So on those rundowns, he can move people and hold the point of attack and stuff like that. But even if they want to blitz on 1st and 10 or 2nd down and 6 or something like that, he can move bodies as well or jump gaps because he's quick enough, even at his gargantuan size as he is. But I don't think you want to ask him to play more than 500 because he didn't play anywhere close to that in college. And I thought that after watching back, someone said to me, I don't remember who it was, one of the people on our show or somebody else I was chatting with, it maybe the combine, who knows? The draft season is so far away, but somebody said he just played too much football last year. They needed him to play every single snap, every single down. And I think he got exhausted after a while. And that kind of holds up when you look at his 2024 versus 2025. So you have to be a little bit careful when it comes to that. So I would guess between 400 and 500 snaps would be the ideal kind of hit the mark on that. And the same goes for Caleb Banks. And then if you can get a lot out of Jalen Redmond being the every down guy, 800 snaps from him if he stays healthy, 500 from Levi Drake Rodriguez, mix and match with maybe Elijah Williams takes a step up. Ty Ingram Dawkins takes a step up and is into that kind of role. Maybe one of these veteran guys they brought in. But it's really going to be an all hands on deck type of situation because I don't think you could just say, hey, young guys, why don't you just go play 1,000 snaps? That would be great. I don't think you could do that. Mike says, any insight into Darrisaw's knee? I know it was a bad injury, but the way it's gone down has me terrified. It's Sharif Floyd's situation feels ripe for an expose. I don't think that it actually requires an expose because eventually we were told what happened. So if you go back, it's interesting. On this show, Ahmad Hicks, who's actually going to come on later in the week, he said during training camp that he had heard that it was going to take longer for Darrisaw to come back than expected. And I was like, oh, that's interesting because it seems like he's on track. And they acted publicly like he was on track. And there were a few times that we heard hey guys, be patient or whatever. But we saw him at practices and it looked like he was going in the right direction. But then it wasn't until much later, I believe after the Chargers game, it must have been after the Chargers game because that was when he left after the first series, that O'Connell revealed that the injury was worse than just a routine ACL. So I think that that's really the answer. And then with Darrisaw, he did not feel comfortable. It looked like playing with the brace. I believe he discussed that, how he just did not really enjoy playing with the brace, and that it made it harder for him coming out of his stance. So he was trying to get used to it. And when you saw him play, it was discomfort. And I think that that's what kept happening is Darrisaw was trying to push through whatever it was that was not feeling right with his recovery. And every time he tried to push through, then it was like, I can't do it. And if you watch some of those reps against Cleveland, when he pulls himself out of the game for pitch count reasons, no, he was clearly not comfortable, and something's not right. He wasn't himself in some of those reps. So should you be concerned? 100%. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he said that he feels pretty good, and we'll take him at his word for now, but we're going to watch these training camp reps very, very closely for Christian Darrisaw and be paying attention to how often is he actually out there during training camp. If it's the whole camp with all the rest of the starters, great. Then, all right, you go into the season with high expectations for him. But if it's, all right, half a day here, rest day there, off this day, not working out that much, then I think we're going to start to have some concerns about him. But I mean, I wouldn't go as far as the Sharif Floyd thing. That was a totally botched surgery and just ruined that guy's entire career. But I don't know about that. Like, he was still able to come back and play, but it should be very worrisome. Yeah, no question about it. Mike says, speaking directly to Brad Childress and Brett Favre with the Superdome scenario, 12 men on the field should have gotten the Uruguay treatment. I don't, find your own way home. Okay. I'm not really familiar with the story of what happened. Did Uruguay, did they have to, after losing the World Cup, like just fly themselves home? Is that what happened? Matt says, I think Jacoby Thomas is going to start. It's not crazy. It's not crazy to believe that Jacoby Thomas could start because he is a very experienced player in college and a lot of football between Indiana. Did he play for another college? You have to memorize 3 different colleges for every player these days. But was it Indiana and then Miami? Now I'm blanking. He was at a couple different colleges, but he played a ton at Miami and was really, really good last year and is coming in as a mature prospect. And then when you hear good things about him from someone like Josh Metellus about how he's picking up the defense pretty quickly, he's also aware that his college defense is nowhere near as complicated as this. Natural playmaker, natural big hitter. I think some of those things will stand out in training camp and in the preseason. And to think about the other guys that he's going up against, I mean, you have Theo Jackson, who's been on the team for a couple years, probably knows the defense better. But if they feel like Thomas can get it and is more physically gifted than Theo Jackson, very possible. And Jay Ward, who it is, not been proven yet that Jay Ward can play. I've liked what I've seen from Jay Ward. So this competition, if there does become one, will be fascinating to see if Jacoby Thomas can make it interesting. I think the more reasonable way to play it for Brian Flores would be to give the benefit of the doubt to the veteran players and then see where you're at with Jacoby Thomas and be ready for him to be a starter for next year. That's probably your plan. But I mean, you have some depth there. When we go through all the different positions, like how many have depth, I would say the safety one actually is probably one of those positions. Hunter, I think if they're not a pretty damn good football team down the stretch, it's going to feel like this organization is headed in the wrong direction. And Matt says, I think they'd fire KO if that happened. I think we're going to be good. You mean if things went sideways, if they went in the wrong direction? Yeah. Well, I don't know about the firing of Kevin O'Connell. That one is very complicated for me because I think, from a roster perspective, there's enough questions here. The quarterback position's enough questions. And he is the type of coach that is on the younger side, who has shown that he can win in the regular season. I prefer to stick with that rather than chasing your tail. Now, if the organization has fallen apart, so like the New York Giants last year, just total calamity. The team isn't even trying. Guys aren't showing up to meetings. It is a mess inside that building. Well, yeah, then it's time to move on. If the building is strong and you think you can win with him as a coach as long as you have a good roster, then I think that's a coach you give much, much more patience to. And I think the Wilfs would give more patience to. But if they go down the stretch and it's a 4-8 start and trying to save your bacon to get to 500 again, like that's going to feel pretty bleak. I agree. And if it doesn't, turn into a relevant season at all, then you're going to be looking at Nolan Teasley and saying, who are you keeping going forward and what direction are you going to take this roster? Do you think you can competitively rebuild, or do you have to really take some parts all the way down to the studs and start to rebuild this thing entirely through the draft over maybe 2 years or 3 years? If they go 6-11, then that's really how it's going to feel. It's going to feel like there is not much left to work with here, and you're going to have to tear this thing down. That would, of course, leave Justin Jefferson's future in the balance, and also it would leave Jordan Addison and his future, Christian Darrisaw and his future. I mean, everybody would pretty much be, who knows the way that they're going to go with Nolan Teasley. If he's going to keep people, if he's going to make big trades and get rid of it, like, it would be kind of all hell breaking loose if they went 6-11. If they win 11 games, that means that a lot of guys who we had question marks about probably played pretty well. It means the offensive linemen who are young or inexperienced, Brandel, Donovan Jackson, probably stepped up to some extent. It means that the defensive line probably played pretty well. Some of the guys that we have questions about on safety, and then you could keep it together and start adding those pieces through the draft. You could make a trade. You could add a couple more free agents and then feel like, all right, we're close. That's what Seattle did. They just kept adding and adding, and eventually they got to the point where they had a ton of talent on the roster and everything broke their way. So the difference between those two records for what Nolan Teasley is going to do, more likely than not, is pretty wild, actually. It's a pretty big gap. So I don't know if they would fire O'Connell or if they would try to ride through a rebuild with him. But a lot rests for their future on this season. I totally agree with that. Mike says, I don't understand why we ramped up Darrisaw so fast. If it was a worst injury, the in and out was strange. Did Darrisaw want to play, or the organization was telling him you're paid a lot, you must play? At least the impression that I've gotten from that is that Darrisaw wanted to be out there as soon as he possibly could. And what he was told was that it was going to be, a long recovery. And this is after O'Connell told us that it was more than just an ACL, that Darrisaw was more ahead of schedule when he came back than he was on schedule, if that makes sense. So he was pushing to do everything he could to be ahead of schedule and get out there and play. This is the impression that I've gotten from our conversations with Darrisaw and O'Connell, is that he wanted it really bad. And it may have just not been right the entire time. It may have needed more recovery. Pushing it may have caused complications. I mean, he's not going to reveal every single detail of that. Neither guy is, but that's kind of how I took it, as he wanted to be out there and was trying to get out there. But if it didn't feel right, I mean, there's a major risk there. I mean, if you're in Darrisaw's shoes and you're out there playing Myles Garrett, and you start feeling swelling or discomfort or whatever, I mean, you don't want to put your longer term at risk. And that's probably a really hard decision to say, I can't go back in, but you can't face Myles Garrett at 50% with your knee. You can't just push through that and hope. So it put everybody in a really difficult situation. And I'm sure that they were all frustrated by it, especially Darrisaw. But at the same time, probably the right thing to do for him to not play when it didn't feel right. So now it really depends on, has the rest and recovery and whatever he's done off the field to get it looked at, to get it evaluated, is it back to where it's supposed to be, or will it never get back to where it's supposed to be? But maybe it was a little rushed. I don't know. Football players want to get out there and play, right? And a lot of times you have to hold them back from trying to go out there too early, and that may have been the case. Goblin Graphics says, what's the under the radar storyline that could become much bigger in camp in the offseason, not quarterback related? Ooh, bigger storyline or under the radar that could become bigger. I mean, you guys want me to keep saying the punting competition. Maybe the punting competition. I guess that's a good question, because we really cover or try to cover everything. And so I'm like, what could become bigger? I'll just toss this out there. Would be Jawan Jennings and where he fits in, because his signing was kind of one of those, for content purposes. Oh, a signing in the middle of the summer. Like, this is great. Well, let's break it down 5 different ways, sideways, right? Break down everything we know about this guy and where he's going to fit in. And then you kind of like, okay, Juwan Jennings on the team and on to the next sort of stuff. But I could see him and Kyler Murray really clicking together. And if those guys form a bond and a connection, because they kind of did, I thought, in minicamp that Jennings got a lot of targets from Kyler Murray. That might be something to watch of the distribution between Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, TJ Hawkinson, and Juwan Jennings. If Jennings becomes a favorite, there is also another world where, and we've seen this before, it's kind of weird, but like the Tajay Sharp or the Kendall Wright who signs and just doesn't really fit, or the Michael Floyd, like these are guys who had names in the league and had big seasons in the league, or at least good seasons, and just didn't work out when the Vikings got them. So then what happens if Juwan Jennings doesn't look like he's fitting as well as they thought he was going to? Then is it like, all right, like Ty Felton, or what if Ty Felton looks great? Then does he potentially get playing time and that kind of thing? Or we've talked about Dylan Bell a little bit, but maybe someone emerges there. I think that 3, 4, 5 wide receiver position is really worth keeping an eye on. So I think that could become a big thing of, well, does he have chemistry with those types of receivers too? Or does one of those guys stand out as kind of a Kyler Murray favorite that maybe we didn't expect? Like, we expected to go Jefferson number 1, Addison number 2, Jennings number 3, Felton probably not playing, but could something change like that? That's the one I think of. But if you've got nominations, like, throw them my way. Hunter, do you agree with how KOC handled the situation, or do you think that he should have named Kyler the starter from the get-go? If it were me, in my shoes, Kyler Murray would have been the starter the day that he arrived, and he would have received every single first-team rep from the first moment of OTAs till the last moment of minicamp, and he would receive every single first-team rep from the day that they arrived at training camp until the day they broke camp, and he would start against the Green Bay Packers, and no one would have anything to say about it. There's a few reasons I think that. Number 1, I don't believe this short of a period of time can solve all of JJ McCarthy's issues. And I also think that his performance over 10 games was so concerning when you perform literally at the bottom level of the entire league that you are just, even considering him as a starting quarterback, like putting yourself at major risk there if he's going to start, of that being, the case again, that if he performs like that again, you're likely to be fired. You're likely to lose your job. So you brought Kyler Murray in to reach a baseline of quarterback play, which he has in the past. And that's what you're looking for. So hand the keys to him. It's your team, and it's on JJ McCarthy. And what I would say to JJ McCarthy is, look, this is Kyler Murray's team, but how you act in these next 6 months or however long it is could really shape where you go in this league. Because number 1, Kevin O'Connell is extremely well connected in the NFL with all the other coaches and all the other quarterback coaches and everybody else. So if he loved the way that JJ McCarthy acted, then he would probably tell people that, right? That we're maybe considering acquiring him. Or look, I mean, Kyler goes out in week 12 and they need somebody to take him the rest of the way and get into the playoffs. You better be ready. Your chance could come, but take the time. This would have been me. Take the time to every single day get better and improve. And we're going to lay out an improvement plan for you. We have not forgotten about you. It's not that we don't care about you, but we got to win football games with a veteran quarterback. That would have been me. Now, saying I disagree with it would be a little bit too far. Like, I can't say that I disagree. Like, I would not have done it this way because of Murray's history, his talent level, what he's done so far in his career. He's had really good seasons. His most recent full season was very good. That would have been enough for me to say this is a Kirk Cousins level quarterback. When the Vikings now I actually think Kirk got better as he was a Viking, and his last season actually all of his last 3 seasons were very good. 2021, 2022, and 2023 were all very good. So those were maybe a little bit higher of a level than Kyler has played in his career. But you think about when they signed Kirk in 2018, he was coming off a 7-9 season with Washington where he didn't play that well, and they still gave him all that money. But his history had been enough to go, all right, well, he's had good seasons and he's our starting quarterback and here's all the money because we need you. There was no, Kirk, you're going to have to come here because you went 7-9 last year and you're going to have to play for your job with somebody else, right? Especially someone who hasn't ever performed well in the league. But it is a different situation. I get it. He's not making $30 million, so you don't have to do that. It's just that the reason for not that I wouldn't do it that way is because the bar is so high for JJ McCarthy. The burden of proof is so high, and it would have to go so bad with Kyler Murray to wash away what we know about these two quarterbacks and their history to get to a point where you would say, you know what? We don't want you, Kyler. JJ McCarthy, you're in. It just doesn't seem realistic that we could get there to where it would be, wow, JJ played such dominant football in what? Really 2 weeks. It's really 2 weeks worth of full hardcore practices for a training camp. That's what we really have here. That just seems a little far-fetched over a 2-week period to eliminate everything you know about these quarterbacks. So I wouldn't have done it that way. However, in order to, if he feels like the best way, because he knows JJ McCarthy better than I do, if he feels like the best way to keep JJ McCarthy engaged, competing, learning, improving is to have a competition like this, then I guess that makes sense. And also, Kyler Murray could get hurt in the first week of practice. He could have someone step on his foot or hit his hand on a helmet or whatever. Like anything can happen at the quarterback position. So it gives the option to Kevin O'Connell to say, all right, well, you were always in the competition as opposed to alienating him. Personally, I wouldn't have worried about that. I would have just said, you played like a backup last year, so you're a backup now until you prove otherwise. But I guess I understand why. And there's always the chance too that Murray just doesn't connect with the offense at all, can't run it. They can't stand him. They don't like anything he's doing out there. It's a total mess. And they decide that they're just going to go with McCarthy. That also seems pretty far-fetched for a guy who's had multiple coaches and good seasons under multiple coaches in the past. So yeah, it wouldn't have been my approach, but I'm also not going to say, O'Connell, you have no idea what you're doing handling quarterbacks, because generally he's been pretty good at that. Contra pass, and what percent chance would you give Juergens of beating out Brandel? Probably 3%. I think that's Brandel's job. Like, they really respect the heck out of Blake Brandel. He started a full season before, played 17 games, and was playing pretty well until Christian Darrisaw got hurt, and then it started to decline in the run game especially. And by the time he got to the end of the season, he had never played 17 games before in 2024. I think he was totally worn out. But I was impressed largely with the way that he jumped into the mix and played last year, because he was in a spot where he didn't get any practice whatsoever at the center position. And then, hey, man, guess what? You're playing center. That is super, super hard. And he was okay. After the first 2 games, he was okay. The first 2 games were rough, but after that, he was fine. And to give average play under those circumstances, I was impressed. And I think Juergens is a little light to be a starting center, that he's got the mind for it. I think he's got the grit for it. Like, that center position, you got to have some toughness, but I just don't know if he has the size for it, because you have to face off with the Dominique Orange sized guys and get under their pads and move those guys. But I think he's a reasonable backup. Like, if you remember Austin Schlottman, I think he's like that. I think he's like an Austin Schlottman who can be around the league for a long time as a backup center. You're always going to need one, and at least the guy knows the offense. Matt says, we've been heading in the wrong direction as an organization since Jim Marshall housed the fumble safe for a safety. They won that game. I don't think they've been headed in the wrong direction for that long. I actually think that they have had a lot of times in their history where they've been heading in a great direction roster wise. I mean, you think about the lead up to when Brett Favre shows up here. The reason why Brett Favre has the season he does and gets the NFC Championship, aside from he's Favre, is they had a great team. They had drafted Adrian Peterson only a couple of years before that. They had drafted Sidney Rice. They had put together this awesome defense that was stacked. They had traded for Jared Allen. Like, they had done so much work, even going back to the missed draft pick and getting Kevin Williams. Like, he was still on the team. So they had done so much work, acquiring Pat Williams and Antoine Winfield. Like, that roster had been slowly built up over years, headed in a great direction, and it had peaked there with 2009 The same thing you could say for drafting Randy Moss, like heading in the right direction with Denny Green to the point where you could step in. Like you can go through all these situations. 2017, if we go back the way that Zimmer built that from 2014, tore a lot of it down, drafted. 16's a really tough year because of the Teddy thing and the injuries on the O-line, but then the overall direction of the defense was great. And I would even say recently going from 2023, where they made a lot of moves to get rid of people. They make some great signings in 2024. They drafted the quarterback of the future. All of that made sense to me. I'm not going to pretend that I wasn't saying it made sense because it did. It made complete sense. It was the plan that I had advocated for. But then life threw them a curveball and they swung and missed at it. And that was Sam Darnold. So they needed to identify the spin of the curve and realize how hard it is to find a quarterback that good and understand that the odds of JJ McCarthy even being at the caliber of Sam Darnold are less than 50%. I mean, if we go through first round quarterbacks who were drafted, we could just even do first round quarterbacks, like over the last 20 years, first round quarterbacks, how many have become as good as Sam Darnold has been over the last 2 years? Very few, or even was in 2024. Very, very few. So they needed to recognize that and be a little more patient rather than rushing it and saying, no, we need to make all these additions to the roster and make all these changes. And we've got to have the cheap quarterback situation. And they just rushed it and they didn't give it enough time. If they had, and Sam Darnold had come back, who knows how it would have played out. But if they even had 80% of their defense from last year, 90% of their defense from last year, and the same weapons and the same coach and all those things, you're definitely looking at being in the playoffs since you were this close with the 28th best quarterback play in the league. So I don't think that they have been going in a wrong direction forever. I think it's always been that one thing that gets in the way. It's been a field goal. It's been a 12 men on the field. It's been a trip to Philadelphia rather than playing the Atlanta Falcons at home, like all those little things. Contrapaston, do you think Caleb Tiernan plays most of the preseason? I very much do. Yeah, I think we're going to see a ton of Tiernan, but I think he'll be at right tackle. So there's going to be some that's my guess. There's going to be some adjustments there. Mike says KOC is an enigma. Offensive genius, but never had a top 10 offense by EPA per play. Has established a strong culture and baseline. Happy if he commits to the run and winning ugly this year. Yeah, the run game has been a major reason why. And I do wonder what would have happened at any point had they had a good running back. Aaron Jones in 2024 started out the season really well and then wore down as the year went along because they didn't have other running backs. That's where you're going out and getting Cam Akers. That's where you have Ty Chandler, who you don't trust, and all that sort of stuff. The teams who have the best running games usually have good running backs. I know that's shocking, but it's true. A lot of the best teams in running have drafted their running backs pretty high, like Ken Walker last year with Seattle, or your Bijan Robinson, your Jahmyr Gibbs. Like that's a trend that sort of shifted back the other way. The Jonathan Taylor, the Vikings have not had a difference maker at running back since, I would say, the first part of 2021. I don't think that Delvin was ever right in 2021. I think he got hurt when, I don't know if it was on purpose, but JJ Watt like twisted his knee or whatever. And then he was banged up in 21. Really the first half of 2020, they have not had great, even like top 10 running back performance. So that's part of why they haven't had the EPA per play playing. I don't know how many teams, here would be something to look up. How many teams have had, let's see, Kirk, can we get them all? Kirk, Dobbs, Mullins, Hall, Darnold, McCarthy, Brosmer, Wentz. Is that 8? Is that 8 different am I missing someone? Is that 8 different quarterbacks have started since 2022? Is there another team that's in the top 10 EPA who started 8 quarterbacks? I'm thinking probably not, would be my guess. So we have to factor that in, that let's talk about, when we evaluate KOC, let's talk about the games with Kirk and Darnold, right? Where he's got quarterback play. And I'm not saying like he owns the JJ thing and that is on his shoulders. But if we're only evaluating like how good of an offensive mind is he, how good of a passing game mind is he, then I think that if we evaluate the games with real starting quarterbacks, that it's very good. But if we take the whole, it looks a little less. But are we really counting the Jaron Hall game? Are we really counting the Max Brosmer game? If we're throwing that into, hey, should you keep Kevin O'Connell? Are you really counting a Max Brosmer game as part of the evaluation? I would not. I would say that no coach in the league would have been very successful under those circumstances. Son of Beavers, New England released a fullback that the Seahawks had on their roster. Can't wait for Teasley to pick him up, and we have a fullback competition. Maybe. I think they feel really good about Max Bredesen. Goblin Graphics, the receiver room could get spicy. I think so. I mean, I think that's in the best case scenario, it does. In a scenario where Ty Felton makes things interesting, then it could be kind of spicy. Or just the new way of playing that they have from Jawan Jennings that is very different from Jalen Nailor. This is where the subtle adjustments of an offense are going to have to be made by Kevin O'Connell, because you're not going to have Jawan Jennings just running go routes. He will get there very slowly. It's not the same as having Jalen Nailor do it. And maybe Ty Felton can earn some sort of role. I think that's possible, that with his speed, he can earn some sort of role as a downfield wide receiver, stretch the field receiver to be on the field and maybe mix and match Jawan Jennings. So he's only playing 30 snaps, 40 snaps a game. You're using big personnel. You're using Felton. I think that's in the best case scenario. So that would be the one that we haven't talked about a ton, because the depth chart is very much set. But if Felton emerges, then you're going to feel much deeper there. Mike, the sleeper worry is the punting game. Ryan Wright was phenomenal last year. Not sexy, but huge for us. Another area where it's risky to assume anything good from the last few years. No, yeah, I mean, Ryan Wright was outstanding last year. He was one of the best punters in the NFL. He could have been all-pro. He was so good. And I don't believe that's going to be easy to repeat. And I also believe that the game shifted last year because of the kickoffs, to where the starting field position was different. And all of a sudden you are in the kicking, where you can kick from 60 yards out. And somebody had the numbers recently on Twitter with the field goals that it over 50 yards, or I think it was over 50 yards, and it's just exploded. So all you need these days for a good drive is like 2 first downs, and then you're there and you're in field goal position for Will Reichard. You start at the 40-yard line as if you're the Vikings, 50-yard line first down, 40-yard line field goal. That's all you need. But if you have a great punter and you're starting at the 40 and you go 3 and out, then you can force the other team to do something they're not very comfortable with, which is driving 85 yards. Teams are now being comfortable with, let's get 2 first downs and we're in field goal position. That's where they're living these days. But then you're saying, all right, well, if you're going to drive 85 yards, what's your EPA for a drive trying to go 85 yards? It's probably very low. So Wright did an incredible job last year. Felton and Tavier Thomas were also good with the punt gunning, and they were a good unit overall. It wasn't just one thing, like that they play into that as well. So if you could be good at it again with Johnny Hecker or Brett Thorson, then it's an advantage. If you can't, it's going to be harder on the defense. We've seen that. The punting game does matter. Contra passed into the Vikings need to draft a top tight end next year to keep up with the Kraft, Loveland, Laporta arms race. That could possibly be the case, but if we're trying to project forward to a 2027 draft, are you picking a quarterback is going to be the first question. And then when we look at other positions that could be of need that are premium positions, edge rusher, with Dallas Turner, but Andrew Van Ginkel not under contract after this. Edge rusher seems like it's going to be potentially really important. Corner, if Isaiah Rodgers becomes a free agent, like that just might be something that gets left behind. And could you play with Josh Oliver and develop another guy and sign somebody? Like probably, but that speaks to the uncertainty of the future for a lot of different positions. I mean, you might be able to work something out with TJ Hawkinson to stick around if he has a great year and he's back and Kyler's awesome. Wouldn't be surprised if Hawkinson wanted to do that. Like he's a Midwest type guy, and I think he's really enjoyed playing for this football team. But if you go 6-11, then you're saying, all right, well, the tight end position is now a huge need and probably a bunch of other ones with veteran players that will not be here into the future. So there's a lot of things that are up in the air, but I don't know if with all the needs that they're going to have that you're going to be able to do the luxury pick of taking a tight end. Depends on how much draft capital you got as well. Hunter said wow, that stinks. You've had 2 torn ACLs, currently in a 7-month post-surgery, and it's psychologically very taxing. Takes a while before you feel like you could play without thinking about your knee. Oh man, I know. And the ACL is probably one of the most underappreciated, very, very difficult things to deal with for players, because players come back, and Adrian Peterson made it worse for everybody by coming back so fast and then having this all-time great season. But it really is, when can I trust it? When is it going to be back to 100%? And guys have said before about the ACLs where it'll be like a couple good days and a couple bad days, and you don't know how far along am I really? So there's a lot of questions that you ask yourself. Am I ever going to be back to 100%? Is it going to be, am I going to go pain-free for multiple days? Oh yeah, and by the way, you got to go out there and play with the fastest and most dangerous people on earth like Myles Garrett. It's very hard, and we don't appreciate enough, I think, all the injuries that guys go through, and I think this is even for J.J. McCarthy too, where the psychological effect of going through that injury for J.J. McCarthy, I think probably did impact him quite a bit, and I don't know if it made a difference last year or not, but I think it was really, really hard on him as somebody who's never had anything go wrong. And then all of a sudden this thing goes catastrophically wrong and you can no longer throw a ball. Plus a lot of these guys, I mean, they're just so active all the time. I mean, think about that. Like if you played video games all the time, every single day, and you love video games and you live stream your video games, then all of a sudden your PS5 broke and you couldn't buy a new one, you'd be pretty sad. Well, that's how it is for these guys. You'd be like, what do I do with my time now? It's like, all I do is go out and run around football fields and throw footballs and play football, and I love it. These guys, you should see them after practice. They're hyped up. They're excited. It's great in the locker room for us, for reporters, because they're in a great mood because they just played football. And to not be able to do that for so many months, for anybody, I think is taxing. And then if you're having complications, it's probably even more so. Let me take a quick pause here. For one, I want to tell you about a FanDuel question of the day, because I didn't have one earlier with Manny when we were talking, but I saw a headline that Kirk Cousins is expected to play this year. Like they hope most of the year rather than Fernando Mendoza to let him develop. But Fernando Mendoza on FanDuel is still, his over-under is 2,350.5 yards. So I'm curious how much you guys think the number 1 overall pick is going to play this year. We'll be keeping an eye on that. 2,550.5 is the over-under for Fernando Mendoza. How much does he play this year? How much do we see old Kirk out there with the Raiders? Also want to tell you about my friends at Brooklyn Betting. They are very much my friends these days because I'm sleeping great for such a long time. Had trouble sleeping, had mattress after mattress. We tried all sorts of different stuff. We slept in different rooms and it just didn't work out. But when we switched to the Aurora Lux mattress by Brooklyn Betting, it's been so much better. My spine feels supported. I can actually relax and get to sleep for the entire night, stay to sleep because I am so comfortable and wake up with a lot more energy to podcast. So what I like about Brooklyn Betting is that it's not one size. Hey, this is the only bed we have. Just take it. All sorts of different options and hard to find sizes if you want that. So we were able to get exactly customized to what we wanted. And also, we're still in the 120 night comfort trial. I'm feeling pretty good about it. But if we didn't love it, then you could swap it out or return the mattress hassle-free with that 120 night comfort trial. So it's been a life changer for me. And you can try it now as well. Go to brooklynbetting.com and use my promo code PURPLE at the checkout for 30% off site-wide during their summer sale. That is brooklynbetting.com and promo code PURPLE, 30% off site-wide. Use the exclusive code. And even if you just need a pillow, go check it out. Anyway, okay, back to your questions, comments, and thoughts. That is not what that's supposed to look like. There it is. Okay. Bloody Soup says, okay, that's funny. Sorry. Yeah, they do have trainers and it is easier for professional athletes, but it's actually not easier for professional athletes because Hunter is just a guy who doesn't have to block Myles Garrett. Christian Darrisaw is a guy that has to block Myles Garrett. So it's not that easy. Hans says more people should talk about who will know the offense better, JJ or Kyler. Kyler could certainly struggle. Well, JJ last year had to have him dumb the offense down by the end of the season. So, I mean, I don't know if it's a guarantee that he's going to know the offense better. I think that's really entirely on Kyler himself, right? Like it's Kyler versus Kyler. It's not going to be the first time when it comes to learning the offense. It's not going to be the first time that he's ever learned a new offense in the NFL. He had to do it when Drew Petzing took over as the offensive coordinator for the Cardinals. So he knows how to do it. But there is a scenario where if he were struggling so much with the offense that they felt like they couldn't even believe in putting him out there, then yeah, you would have to go with JJ McCarthy. But I also think that McCarthy himself has to show a much better command of the offense than he did last year in the actual games. And that's what I mean about the bar and the burden of proof. Like when you've actually, during training camp, McCarthy looked fine with the offense, but when they actually played the games, they couldn't run it. And they couldn't run it successfully. Like that's the problem is even if you talk yourself into, wow, this looks really good in training camp and he is just throwing lasers to everybody and everybody's super impressed. How can you remove it from your knowledge of what happened when he actually played last year? Now, that doesn't mean I think it's impossible for him to become the quarterback. It's just that it would have to be so much better than Kyler Murray. And Murray has all of this previous experience of how to learn an offense and how to play in the league and how to succeed, at least to some extent in the league, that he should be able to pick this up. If he doesn't, then we're going to be like, what the heck, man? But he should be able to come back from minicamp and all that with a good knowledge base of it. I think in minicamp, there were times where you could really see him sort of thinking through things and then having those conversations, but that's why they call it the learning phase. That's why we really shouldn't be evaluating minicamp passes. We can see him throw the ball and how nice that looks, but we shouldn't be saying, oh, in 7-on-7, he was 3 for 5, and that means it was bad. Like, we shouldn't be doing that because that's just too early for it. But in training camp, we absolutely should be evaluating every single pass. And if it looks like he's still thinking and that he hasn't mastered it the way he's supposed to, then yes, we are going to be wondering, why isn't he picking up the offense the way he was supposed to? So yeah, it's a question for sure. Goblin says, I do think that running back will be drafted on day 2 next year. Yeah, 2027. It could be. It all depends on where the roster's at. If you feel like, man, this last draft class was great, we're keeping Hawk, we're keeping Will Fries, we're keeping Byron Murphy Jr., we're re-signing Isaiah Rodgers. If they're doing all that, keep the band together, then you could draft a running back in the second round. If you lose Hawkinson, lose an offensive lineman, lose some players on defense, you're going to feel like you don't have the luxury to do that, and you might have to address that at a later date. Demad says, I'm still trying to forget the Max Brosmer game. Hey, they won, so there is that. And you do have to give credit where it's due that he did win them the New York Giants game, that he made a really good throw to Justin Jefferson. Look, I mean, Brosmer is a guy that needs development and needs a lot of work to be out on an NFL field. And he was thrown out there way too early. Same with Jaren Hall, just thrown out there way too early. That's really what it was with Max Brosmer. And then to be thrown out there against the Super Bowl champion defense on the road in one of the toughest environments to play. It's like, come on. That's not so easy. Scoldger's Rise, he says, I can't cherry pick. Oh, do you mean with like actually evaluating the coach? No, it's not. Let's work on the definitions here. Words mean something. Cherry picking would be if I was saying, well, if you only look at Thursday night games and Sunday afternoon games, then O'Connell's a great coach. That would be cherry picking. To say that I think it's a better evaluation tool of the coach when he's had his starting quarterback than when he's playing 5th rounders and undrafted free agents and journeyman backups who have won 30% of their career games or less, I don't think that's a better evaluation tool. If you're saying, oh yeah, well, he's really just the coach that was coaching that Christmas day. I don't think that those games, if we're evaluating whether to keep the coach going forward, should be a big part of the evaluation. I guess you could throw out some percentage of it, but do we really want to decide if Kevin O'Connell is a good enough offensive coach to win a Super Bowl based on Jaron Hall and Nick Mullins and Josh Dobbs and Max Brosmer? Or do we want to make that determination on starting quarterbacks? Because if they make the Super Bowl, what do you think will have happened at quarterback? Do you think they'll be on their 4th QB of the year? Do you think Carson Wentz will be playing if they make the Super Bowl? Or do you think it's going to be a really good starting quarterback? I don't think it's cherry picking to say that if they can make the Super Bowl, it's going to be with a starting quarterback. And if we're going to evaluate a coach and be fair to him, we also have to say he's had 8 quarterbacks play, or could it even be 9? 8 quarterbacks play in these 4 seasons. And I don't know how many other coaches who have had 8 quarterbacks play in 4 seasons even have their job still. Because I looked this up one time, unsurprisingly, how often do backup quarterbacks win? Like, how often do their teams win when a backup starts? About 30% of the time, which shows you how crazy it was for Case Keenum to do what he did. But it's about league-wide 30% of the time that a backup quarterback wins. So I don't know that that's the right way to figure out if O'Connell is the right coach to go forward with. That is my point. Mike, we weren't top 10 by EPA in 2022 or 2024, but they were in passing. They were in total EPA for passing for both of those years. That's also the point, is they were not over because their run game suffered a lot with both of those seasons. And, there's also, here's the other trouble with some of those stats. 2022, they threw a lot. It was when you increase the volume, you decrease efficiency unless you have a superstar player. So Kirk Cousins' efficiency was less in 2022 than it was in some previous years when Gary Kubiak or Clint Kubiak or Kevin Stefanski didn't really want to throw the ball a lot with him. Or I should just say Mike Zimmer didn't want to throw the ball a lot with him and wanted to run all play actions and favorable downs. So you're going to have better EPA per play. Like, this is not a great stat, honestly. I don't love it when it comes to EPA per play because there's so many complications. I don't think it's the greatest way to evaluate a lot of stuff. Because if you look at the total EPA, which the total points you put up is something that's pretty important, their passing games in both of those years were in the top 10 overall. So the amount of total value that you got out of your passing game was in the top 10. So I guess you could kind of look at it a lot of different ways, but I feel like that one's been thrown at O'Connell a lot without any sort of nuance to it at all. But I think it deserves some. Now, that doesn't mean he couldn't have been better or that, the offense was not one of the 5 best offenses in the league. And I don't think that they had the running game for it, the personnel, but I also think he left a lot on the table there. So there's a lot of detail to that. Demad, hope to see more Ty Felton this season. I'll be interested. I think he's got the mentality and the work ethic and the speed, but does he have the ability to run the routes the way they need him to and catch the ball? Last year, there were more drops than there should have been during training camp, and the routes I thought needed more detail to them, in and out of the routes. He does have great speed, though, and made some plays last year during camp, just didn't get much of a chance to get on the field. And I think it would have been more interesting if he did. Demad, do you think that the wide receivers are the top 3 unit in the NFL, or the top 3 receivers are the top 1 in the NFL? Yeah. Because they have a third guy that has 132 catches over the last 2 years. I think that they do. Because the Bengals have 2 that might have the best duo in the NFL, and the Rams might have the best duo in the NFL that might be better. Like, if Devontae Adams is 100% and Puka Nacua, that's better than, especially with Addison's last season. But if we think about the best version of all 3, I mean, the best version of Jefferson is a MVP candidate. The best version of Jordan Addison is 900 yards and 10 touchdowns. And the best version of Juwan Jennings is 80 catches and 900 yards. Like, I think that it should be considered that. If you add up just what they did last year, no, but they're all in their prime and they should still be good players. I would say yes. So, and this is the point about Kyler Murray is, we're going to really find out what Kyler Murray truly is. there's a new opinion every day on Kyler Murray at this point until we see him actually get out there. And I was fact checking Steve Smith today, which is a funny sentence. Like, I saw Steve Smith put out a video and he called Kyler Murray a check down Charlie, which is not really the truth in 2024. And he only played 5 games last year. So how are you supposed to evaluate that when it's a 5-game sample size? But in 2024, Kyler Murray ranked in the middle of the league in terms of how often he attacked the intermediate part of the field. And he was very effective in the top third of the league in terms of his PFF grade, in terms of his quarterback rating in the intermediate parts of the field. So I don't think that that's a real thing, that he can't throw between 10 and 19, as Steve Smith was talking about. I think he probably just looked at his numbers last year, and a very high percentage of his passes were underneath in those 5 games. They didn't block particularly well. They didn't run particularly well. They were winning in a couple of those games. And I think what we're trying to get completions, their receivers weren't playing well. There's factors that go into those things. But the bigger sample on Murray is that he has been pretty solid in that area of the field. And if he can succeed there for Kevin O'Connell the way he did in 2024 for Drew Petzing, then they're going to utilize those 3 receivers and we're going to see those numbers return. If there's hesitation, if he doesn't throw with anticipation, if he doesn't understand the offense the way he should and doesn't get the reads right, then that stuff won't work out with the efficiency that it needs to. And we won't be thinking that they have the best wide receivers because they'll, come short of expectations. I don't think that they want to be a super high volume offense, which may leave some guys short fantasy numbers wise, but we're smart enough to work our way through that. Dirty Mike, strong wide receiver class next year. And this is Purple Insider. Yeah, no, you're right about that. You're right about that, my friend. That's why the premium positions, but there will be a drum and that drum will say wide receiver and I will be the band leader banging the drum, depending on what happens with Jordan Addison. I mean, I was really factoring in this year with the wide receiver draft that we just don't know what's going to happen with Addison into the future. We will know after this year. If Addison is great and catches 70 passes for 1,000 yards and 10 touchdowns, and they just love how he's handled himself and matured and everything else, well then, yeah, I mean, probably not talking about drafting a wide receiver high. I will still want to draft one, but maybe not high. 3rd round, but they'll be discussing more of a big contract extension for Addison at that point. Now, if he catches 45 passes for 610 yards and 3 touchdowns, and it's a real disappointment, and Murray leans more on Jawan Jennings, and it feels like it just didn't really materialize, then they probably play him on the 5th-year option. You should draft a wide receiver at that point. We're already in the 2027 draft. We need some camp practices, folks. AP Carlin, thoughts on people saying that if the Vikings only have 1 or 2 wins by the trade deadline, the Jets will ask for a trade. I don't think that the Vikings will be that bad. I also don't think the Vikings will be that bad. That would have to be a total catastrophe. Last year was a total catastrophe, and they still found a way over 500. Though, we may even give them a little too much credit for that, since the last game Clayton Tune started. So call it a 5. I should refer to it as a 500 season last year, not above 500, because the Packers were not trying at all to win that football game. But anyway, not the point. If they have 1 win by the trade deadline, then that starts to become a conversation. Yeah. I mean, it would have to. Jefferson, if they have 1 win, when is the trade deadline now? Is it week 9? I mean, 1 win by then or 2 wins by then? Yeah, you're going to have a lot of conversation about that. And Jefferson might really be wanting that. As bad as he's wanted anything is to get out if it's going that horribly and the whole ship has sunk to the bottom of the ocean. I don't think that's going to happen either. But the possibility of this coming to a head is very real. That's just how the situation sets up. And also when guys get into their prime and they have certain expectations for their career, they start thinking bigger picture. They start thinking about, like, what am I going to accomplish yardage wise for my career? When am I going to do enough to get a gold jacket? I think that Jefferson is at this moment borderline has done enough to get a gold jacket. Like if his career ended today, he'd be like a Terrell Davis thing. And we'd say, yeah, super short career, but he was the best and he would deserve it. But if he wants to really guarantee that he's going to be a Hall of Famer, he can't have some big fall off where he's trying to eke out 1,000 yards every single year. Then people will talk about him as the wide receiver who was so hot at the beginning of his career and then totally fell off, like a Herman Moore type of thing, which I think was injury related and quarterback related. But Herman Moore always comes to mind of a wide receiver that if you were watching football from like 94 to 97, you thought Herman Moore was the guy. And if you're not someone old enough to have been watching football then, you're like, who the heck are you talking about with Herman Moore? Justin Jefferson doesn't want to be the one of those who the heck you talking about 10 years after his career. He wants to be one of the best of all time. So yeah, I mean, that would be considered, I think at that point. More so really after the year, I think we'll have a better sense for where that stands. Hunter going with the under on the FanDuel question of the day. You're thinking they stick with Kirk for a very large percentage of the season. I would say that they'll stick with Kirk till like the second half of the year and then reassess. Because if they love what they've seen from Mendoza behind the scenes and they are, I don't know, 3-7, then what's the point? It's Drake May. The handling of Drake May was perfect by the Patriots. They ran Jacoby Brissett until they couldn't run Jacoby Brissett anymore, till it was just unacceptably bad quarterback play. And Kirk is probably as good as Jacoby Brissett at this point in his career. Maybe a tad better. Scolders Rise, just making the point of KOC's inability to make adjustments to his scheme when he has fifth rounders or practice squad worthy quarterbacks has to be a part. It truly doesn't. I don't know. I don't know what you think you can do scheme wise for Max Brosmer to win or to perform at a high level against the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, if you think there's something, I mean, can we ask Vince Lombardi if there's something you can do when you have a quarterback that is an undrafted free agent playing against the Super Bowl champion defense on the road for his first start ever? And we're going to say that it's O'Connell not adjusting? I mean, I don't know. I think he adjusted fine on Christmas Day when he knew he couldn't pass and then just ran and played defense. I also think that an underappreciated for Kevin O'Connell, and I look, he's under pressure. He's under a ton of pressure. We know this for this year. And we know the gaffes and we know the highlights and we know all this stuff. Well, all of us know Kevin O'Connell and who he's been as a head coach of this team, right? So even like litigating it is almost kind of weird because like we all know the set of facts that we're dealing with here, right? But one thing that might go underappreciated is from 2023 to 2024, they did have to adjust their offense because Kirk Cousins had 2 years in it and knew it inside and out. And it was really the offense that O'Connell had brought over from the Rams. So you had Kirk running that offense that won the Super Bowl from the Rams. And then you get Sam Darnold. And if you watch the first half of the season with Sam Darnold, it is not the same. There is more under center. Like Kirk was out of the shotgun a lot in those 2 years. There is more under center. There is more play action. It was simplified for Sam Darnold early in the season, and then it opened up as it went along. So the idea that it's impossible for him, I think you guys just want him to run the football better, and I totally agree with you. But if you're saying that, man, they really should have adjusted better for Jaren Hall, like the guy's not even in the NFL anymore. That's a pretty darn hard. If you can't win with Jaren Hall, man, you're fired. Like that's weird. I can't get behind that. Demad, is there any heat on the seat for O'Connell this year? Is his future unknown if he finishes with a losing season below 8 wins? Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think that would go for almost any coach. But when you have the mistake that they made last year with the quarterback position, and I think anyone with any common sense knows that Kevin O'Connell had a pretty big say in the quarterback position for last year and that decision to let Sam Darnold go. And then the way things played out, and yeah, you get to 500, but only before you had totally catastrophic results before that, right? And you could say, well, you were this play away or that play away, or if only somebody didn't have a child or like that's all a bunch of excuses. Like the results are what they are. You don't have a playoff win to lean on. You have some good regular seasons, and those have been really fun and really good. And there's not too many 14 or 13 win seasons in Vikings history or any team's history that doesn't have Tom Brady or Peyton Manning. So Yeah, that's great. And that's hard to do. And that's proof of concept that O'Connell can coach a team that can seriously compete and win divisions and so forth. But if you go 2 years in a row where you are just fighting to stay at 500 or alive with a very talented team, and if you botch the quarterback position again, then it's going to be pretty hard to make a strong argument. If you end up with 7 wins and the quarterback situation goes to hell and it feels like you got to rebuild this entire thing, then the Wilfs would be within their, sanity, I guess, the range of sanity to make a change to get someone that Nolan Teasley wants and then rebuild from scratch together. I don't think that that's going to happen. I think that they're too good of a coach team in order for us to get to that point, but you never know. And if it does, the realities of the NFL are coaches who miss the playoffs or don't win playoff games for 5 years, coaches who miss the playoffs 2 years in a row with pretty rough seasons. It's not a league that has a whole lot of patience. I do think the Wilfs are willing to be a little more patient because he's been a great front door to the franchise, because they have had those great seasons, because the players like him and they care a lot about their players' opinions. So that's going to matter as well. But results are always going to drive decisions like that. Mike says, not sure if win total alone is a good way to evaluate KOC's safety. If the defense regresses, but offense starts driving the success, but we're 9-8, that's way different. Yeah, I would agree with that as well. If you are, and look, 9-8 last year, where you start 4-8 and then have as easy of a schedule as it gets down the stretch and play Clayton Tune to get over 500, is really not one of the better 9-8 seasons in history, right? If you were to go back and forth, maybe, and some of those games were unwatchable. If you went back and forth, let's say it's the Vikings 2021 season with one more win and way better culture. Let's say defense gets hurt. It's really struggling. The offense is doing great, but you're having to win every game at the last minute. You lose some games at the last minute. It's a very, very exciting and entertaining season. And you end up winning or whatever in the last game of the season to go 9-8, and you miss the playoffs because of a tie break. But your offense let's say it's like the Lions season. That's a good example. It's the Lions season from last year. You end up with a top 5 offense, but some stuff went wrong. I don't think you're moving on from Kevin O'Connell then. I think that would be crazy to do so. But if it's a 9-8 like it was last year, if it's a redux, that's pretty hard to make the case because it was ugly for most of the time and you weren't in a lot of those games. There have been very few games since I've covered the team where you could just shut the laptop at halftime and be like, oh, I'm done. I've got my story written. I already know what we're saying here because this thing is over. That doesn't happen a lot, and that happened a lot last season. So how it looks also matters. If you play in the best division and they're great and 9-8 is 3rd or 4th, well, I don't know, man. That's pretty hard. Like that would be pretty harsh, right? So I agree with what you're saying, Mike. It's not just all W's and L's, and that's the way we're going to do this. How it goes down, you're also trying to project for the future. If you start to slip when it comes to the culture stuff and players aren't buying in anymore, and sometimes that happens, the Leslie Frazier kind of thing where it's like they just sort of stop listening. It happens. And the pressure gets to people and he goes crazy. Like I've talked about that before. Somebody asked me, every podcast I've done, every other person's podcast I've gone on, like as a guest, they always ask, is Kevin O'Connell in the hot seat? And my answer is often, as long as he doesn't go nuts, I don't think so. But coaches sometimes get under this much pressure and they start to crack and they start to make bad decisions. This happened to Zimmer in 2021. Like I thought he made a lot of bad decisions, bad coaching decisions along the way, bad press conferences, bad ways of treating people, all that sort of stuff. And it's like, your team is pretty good. You should be able to eke out some of these wins. But I feel like the team was so beaten down by him because he had lost it that, that's how they end up out of the playoffs. So if you don't do that and you keep your head on your shoulders, then this is a good enough team and a good enough coaching staff to be at least the 9-8. So, and you're right about that, Demad, that the safety net is certainly Brian Flores, because if Flores wasn't here last year, I don't know what their record would they have been. The Jets. I mean, if they had Aaron Glenn and the Jets defense, maybe it would have been good. They would have drafted Jeremiah Love. Then we would never complain about the run game ever again because he'd be awesome. But it would have been that bad. And I'm sure some of you would say, kind of wish it was. But here we are. So anyway, there's a lot coming up for the next couple of days. I'm going to have another Porch podcast, which I'm excited about. Dave Campbell of the Associated Press. We're supposed to record that tomorrow. And Ahmad Hicks from Fox 9 is going to make an appearance. These are all planned, so I hope it all gets executed well. And also still planning on going live tomorrow night. So a lot to look forward to into the next couple days. And then the way I believe it's going down for next week is Teasley and O'Connell are going to talk Tuesday. And then the first time we're out there, I think, is Wednesday for an unpadded first practice, which we will use to determine the entire rest of the summer. So anyway, thanks you guys. And if anything comes up, if there's any breaking news, there are random extensions that are popping up around the NFL, like Devontae Wyatt, Jordan Brooks signed an extension with the Dolphins. I have that right. Today, I didn't look deeply at that, but yeah, so extensions are starting to pop up a little bit here before training camp. Maybe we'll get one, the right before camp extension. Maybe we'll get an announcement when Teasley and O'Connell talk. I guess we'll see, but we are very close, my friends. We are knocking at the door of training camp. So we'll, planning on talking with you guys tomorrow night. I guess we'll see if anything comes up, and we will go from there. So thanks everybody for watching and listening, and we will see y'all very soon.